Good morning, January 1st, 2023. We are here from different parts around the country and some outside of the country, Douglas, to talk about the mental obsession. And I've added also in the topic section, emotional sobriety, because emotional sobriety is largely what addiction and recovery from addiction is about. And emotional sobriety, just like sobriety, is about sane living. It's about sane living in all aspects, not just the one aspect having to do with one symptom that has plagued us for whatever reason. The underlying mental issue to every symptom that people suffer from, every compulsion, every impulsion, every impulsive behavior, and every reactive behavior, they're all defenses trying to escape culpability, accountability, and responsibility for the conditions that are hard to live with. And if I can turn my thoughts against my thoughts by thinking my thoughts become true because I think they're true, then I have effectively taken on, at the most primary aspect of my human existence, truth and reality, as though I can beat them and overdo them and outdo them by doing more and more and more and more of what's impossible to ever accomplish. And that would normally be the primary inner issue that people who drink and use drugs and do any compulsion want to feel better about. So addiction is essentially a thought chasing an impossible idea. It's the idea that I can, if I have an allergy to alcohol and I drink a drink, the allergy being an abnormal response says the best thing I can do is have another one and another one and another one and another one and another one. And if it feels a little better, then I think continuing to do it to the point of oblivion will feel really good. And what am I trying to feel better than? This underlying turmoil that I've created in the thinking I'm doing about my thinking. So when thinking thinks of itself, when I start thinking about my thinking rather than what's going on around me, I start thinking of a self born in thought, which becomes who I think I am, because if I think the thoughts are real, I'm going to become who I think those thoughts portray. And that would be ego, an image. It isn't a false image, again, until I think it's true and it's who I am. Any more than when I look in the mirror, I can say that's me, when in fact it's actually a reflection of my face or my body or whatever it is that's standing in front of the mirror. It's not actually the thing it's reflecting because there's no substance to it. There's no blood, there's no air, there's no depth. It's just an image. It's a reflection. And I think the old Greek story about Narcissus seeing himself for the first time in the water sort of reflects that historic awareness that when we start looking at ourselves, we're really looking at thoughts, and thus who we think we are and what we think about ourselves. And if who we think we are is what we think, we need to think obsessively, or that self we think we are is at risk of dying, which I would say causes great anxiety, great stress, great depression, trying to constantly manage this thing that has no basis to begin with, other than the thoughts we have about it that we think are true. So how do we notice it? It seems impossible to consider this and think that every thought we've ever had or every thought we have, we need to start assessing and take apart. It's very easy, though. If we're thinking about each thought individually, we're forgetting that all thoughts are generated in the exact same way. So we'll just talk about thoughts together. And thinking in principles is one way of doing that, because we can start looking at things that don't change when our thoughts change. And they don't change when the day changes, and they don't change when the weather changes, and they don't change when circumstances change. They just stay put. And what would those be? In terms of our functional literacy and capacity, they would be the laws of nature, the laws of order, the laws of the universe. How do things work? How do things function? If I am thinking in ways that are dysfunctional, because I'm thinking of thoughts being true, I'm not going to function very well in the world, because I'm going to be hamstrung by a preoccupation of thinking that doesn't even allow me to address or interact with everything around me honestly. So I'm not going to be willing to learn the lessons that I'm being taught by the deficiencies I'm applying. And I'm going to think that what I need to do is keep doubling down on the same idea, and someday it'll be right. Because I'm hoping in vain, and I'm hoping against hope, that if I just keep doing the wrong thing, one day it will be right. And my mother used to say to me, 2 wrongs don't make a right. And I would say, being a smart ass, well, the third one might. So I worked hard to try to maintain this line of narrow thinking as a child. When I drank the first time, I drank 2 8-ounce glasses of whiskey at 14 years old. I had no allergy. I had no craving, but I had an obsession that knew I needed to do something to try to put myself out of the misery I'd been suffering. And that's how it started for me in terms of my drinking and my drugging. I was trying to feel better about what was worse, but what I did was think that ignoring what's bad is a solution. So feeling better about what's bad was always the problem. And to be sober, for instance, and not be doing that drinking and not be doing those drugs to make me feel better, all of a sudden gives me a chance to start looking at the thinking that led to the insane idea that drinking and drugging was my best solution. And that thinking, I would say, is a pandemic in human mental thought. It's not something that one or some of us do. It's something we're all not only capable of doing, but probably something humans have suffered from as long as they have considered that self-indignation and righteousness was justification to kill other people, either individually or en masse. And we've been good at that through human history. We've had this seeming drive to dominate other people. And the struggle we're ultimately having is the inability to actually control something in us that doesn't even exist. It's simply a thought that we think is real and then think we need to tame it, when in fact, the more we think about taming it, the more we give it credit for existing and end up reinforcing it. So we're creating the bowl that we're riding, and we're getting it better as we're trying to hang on desperately for our life. So one of the ways to notice the difference between an absolute nature, for instance, a state of knowing awareness that would be natural, if it's natural in the universe and the laws of the universe and the laws of nature always stay the same, then we are based in that. That isn't something we need to achieve. It's something we've been given. What I tend to fight for is wanting credit for it, because I want to get credit for turning the lie about who I am into truth. And I want to turn credit about turning the thoughts I have into truth, right? So the difference, here's one difference. I either say thank you for it because I appreciate it, and now I'm appreciable in my actions, or I say fuck you. I want credit for it. And what do I become? Depreciated in my actions, dysfunctional in my actions, dysfunctional in my relationships. But it's the relationship I'm having with my own experience that's initially dysfunctional that I'm trying to escape by blaming and using everyone else and all the messes I make to think it's out there, and the world is difficult and the world is hard and the universe is tricky and complicated. And none of those things are true. The world is not difficult. It is not hard. The universe is not even complicated. It has been doing what it's been doing as long as it's been doing it perfectly. Every present moment, it's been doing exactly what it's been doing, and so too have we. To think we haven't shows again how much reliance we put on thinking being our source rather than noticing that we have an absolute source. So another aspect of that is starting to notice that when there's turmoil and anguish internally, something is being thought about that isn't true. It could be something cultural. It could be something historic from our own past. It could be something that we inherited from somebody that we heard, that we loved, and we wanted to believe them as a sign of our commitment to them, but it wasn't true, and we end up suffering with them, and all of a sudden our love for them is a form of suffering. It's pretty twisted quickly. So if there's any turmoil, you don't need to think of where it's coming from at all, because we're not trying to get where we're not. We're looking at being where we are, because we've always been where we are. We've never been anywhere else. We've always been doing what we've been doing. We've never done anything else. And if in a conversation, we as humans can start looking at what we're doing individually, there's a good chance, as we often see here, the common nature between what we're doing collectively. Different faces, different places, different times attached. The stories are the same. They're either excuses why I shouldn't be where I am and have what I have, which means I should be somewhere else with something else, which is impossible because I'm always here with everything. If we're all connected to everything, we're always where everything is. We don't have to see it for that to be true. So that's one of the ideas that comes out of it. And I'm missing, sort of doing this off the cuff, I'm missing the second point, but I'll come to it. The conflict, if that turmoil happened and everything in reality was in turmoil, we would not notice the turmoil. There would be no comparative ability to even notice that something's wrong. And we have great clarity, most of us, and if you listen to the conversations, it's kind of interesting how clear people are and how absolutely confident they are in their assessment of what's wrong in the world, while they're at the same time struggling with self-doubt and uncertainty and a sense of displacement. That isn't a coincidence. That's an absolute consequence of attempting to make believe it's not me. I couldn't be possibly doing this. Couldn't be me doing this. It couldn't be me making this choice. It's got to be something and everything else. So isn't it a big leap that I could overlook the immediacy of what I'm doing now in the name of understanding everything going on out there perfectly? That's a pretty big leap. When in fact, I'm almost not even relating to everything out there. I'm only seeing it according to how I'm thinking it is, which isn't what it is. It's how I'm thinking it is. So if that turmoil, so the 2 points are, if you're in turmoil, notice that you wouldn't be in turmoil if you didn't know better. And if you're thinking the world is wrong, that's how projection works to try to help us escape. We create these perceptions that we think are truth, and they're just stories to justify not being responsible for what we're doing. Now, if there's an absolute state of being in this universe, and I would say it's not in the universe, the universe is of it like we are of it. So the universe in relation to an infinite being is tiny. It's a speck. It really doesn't amount to much of anything other than an idea, just consciousness. If that infinite source is the source of our nature, then it's something we absolutely know right now and always have. And the point of the looking back and trying to figure out where the thought started and all that kind of stuff is just another loop, thinking it's up to thinking to solve the problem, rather than say the problem is telling me right now I'm disturbed. That's it. That's all I need to know. Something is wrong with what I'm thinking, not who I am. When I think thoughts are true, I think who I am is what I think, and then I think my life depends on my thinking. Not true. Yet the anxiety we use to justify it must be true, when pain itself is actually an indication of something wrong, shows how quickly we will translate something into self-serving needs for our own justification to excuse ourselves from doing exactly what we're doing. So the immediacy of it is that it's always happening where we are. And if we simply go with what's on the surface, it will include the substance. And if what we look at on the surface has no substance, it will become silly to consider it does, which is what we do when we think our thoughts are true. If the thoughts have no basis, like a lie, very interesting phenomenon with the lie. A lie only exists on the basis of a claim that it's true. So it claims to be the only thing it can't be. What happens to a lie when it's a lie? It's gone. When you say a lie is a lie, you're no longer lying. It's gone. It's over. The only way it survives is on the fight for the claim that it is what it can't be. That's exactly what we do when we try to turn thoughts into reality and think that who we think we are is all we are. We're trying to turn that thinking desperately into an absolute construct that never stays still, because thinking's always changing like everything else in the universe is doing. And we think we're out of control because we can't control something that doesn't even exist. And I would say out of control is the right term, because out of control means no control. Doesn't mean I had it once and now I'm slipping. It means no control. So the other aspect of that is, as we're slipping and sliding and feeling disjointed and all that stuff, we wouldn't feel disjointed if we weren't absolutely connected. You can't be disjointed from something that you're not connected to. How would you know to do that? If my arm was off my body and I looked at it in the street, I'd say, that doesn't belong there. I just have a sense that where my arm belongs is here. Another interesting point. If I think about my arm, I don't all of a sudden start talking to everybody about being an arm. Right? If I think about my eyes, which are the thing in my body that sees, I never see my own eye, and yet I can think about them. But I don't think I become what they are. I just let them do what they do because it's reliable, because I always see what they see. Even if my vision is poor or impaired, they see what they see according to how they are. Always. And yet when I think about my thinking, I immediately think, that's me. That's all I am. And it creates this internal obsessive need to constantly think about ourselves. And it isn't even who we are that we're constantly thinking of, because it, like a lie, needs the constant maintenance of our attention to survive. And if we don't give it that attention and people around us don't agree with that, we feel threatened. And the threat is legitimate for the fact that we're threatening our own existence by undermining our body's ability to function, by creating stress and pressure and causing complications in it that undermine its ability to function on our behalf, so it even turns against us. We've actually turned against ourselves in the name of trying to confirm ourselves. So it shows how insanity works. It feeds on itself to look like it's doing something when it's doing nothing, but it is having an impact on us that's negative to be observable. So the turmoil again becomes evidence that we know better, that we are better, and that we have a perfect stability to be so easily affected by things that are small and then consider them so big that nothing else is happening but that problem and that person. So when I start thinking who I am is what I think, I start becoming very concerned about what everybody else thinks about me. My whole life is dependent on selling them ideas about who I think I am, because if I don't have their vote, I'm all of a sudden canceled, like in modern culture. All of a sudden, I don't exist because they don't agree with me. Well, that I doesn't exist to begin with, other than my insistence, my continued insistence that somehow or another, I will get it there if I just keep pushing, if I just keep working, if I just keep ignoring truth and reality, someday I'll get better and it will become true and real. That is what kids read fantasy and fairy tales over. It was always about a dream coming true. Well, dreams are dreams. The whole point of a dream is that it isn't true. Why would a dream, when dream comes true, it's reality, it's happening. It isn't something we're dreaming about, we're actually witnessing it, and it can be shared. The difference in reality is that we all share it. The difference in this idea of myself is that nobody shares it with me, but what they share are all the deficiencies that I base all my actions on because I'm desperately trying to correct something that I can't fix. So I would say that's insanity. And emotional sobriety is about sane living, period. So our ability to express that knowing nature is what we are designed to do. It's what thinking is designed to do. And it is doing it and always has been doing it. We've just been mistaking it for what it is and asking it to do things it can't do. And it says, all right, you want to turn the key with the battery, the starter doesn't work. You want to wear the battery out by trying to start the car? Let's go. The car doesn't argue with me. It'll let me run the battery down. Now I have a starter problem and a battery problem. So when I get the starter fixed, I got no battery to start it. That's what we're doing. And to talk about it seems so silly to think that we could wait this long, but it shows how much terror we've created and self-loathing and self-hatred and all those words. If you look up self in an old dictionary, because the new ones don't actually allow you to look at the pages, go under self, and there's pages of self this, self that, self this, as though self-help changes help because now it's serving a self. Who's the self it's serving? It seems to be it no longer help is help. It's self-help. And this is not self-help, by the way. We're not trying to help ourselves to a self that doesn't exist anymore. So that's a probably longer than normal introduction, but I go where I go and say what I say, and I'm happy to be able to discuss this openly, small or large groups. I've done it with individuals for years, and I'm happy to do it with a broader audience and happy to have people listening out there. And we know that you're out there. I look at the cities, the people, South Africa this past week, and there's somebody in India, a couple of people in India, England, outside of England, Ireland, Latvia, Slovenia, all kinds of countries around the world. And my sense is we are a human population that shares intimately and simultaneously and synchronicitously everything that we have. And we're not here to figure out how to fuck with each other and hurt each other. That is not the goal. The goal is to be so abundant that we have so much that we just want to give it all away because we don't need it, because the satisfaction of being fulfilled doesn't require we have more consumer goods. It's actually in the interaction that we have with each other and the ability to express the love that's bountiful and never shy, never scarce. It's interesting how we try to turn thinking into abundance and end up suffering from scarcity. We're trying to do what's already there. The one problem with trying to get somewhere, the hardest place to get is the place you're in if you don't think you're there. And that's what we're talking about. We're already there. We already know it. We just haven't been exposing our thinking to it. We haven't been utilizing our conversation about it so that our thinking can start actually relaxing and doing what it's designed to do, which is to follow the lead of this knowing self so that it can express that knowledge and have a better sense of what to do in the face of nature and the laws of nature and all that stuff, rather than think it's simply a process of elimination. And out of the trillion potentials, maybe I'll come up with the right one someday. That knowing sense guides us. It's there for us. It is our inheritance, our entitlement, our essence. Pretty dramatic to want to squander that in the name of self-righteous indignation over a self that doesn't even exist. Anyway, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jack.
I'm glad to see you, Chris, and have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
And everyone else, everywhere else too. It's the medium we have today to communicate is phenomenal. And my sense is we can penetrate borders that used to be able to keep people from understanding what was actually happening. And it's helping them see that a lot of what is happening isn't necessary. And it isn't necessary to be quiet about what's wrong with what's happening. And being right doesn't mean overlooking what's wrong. It means starting to talk about it honestly and simply admit it. And to look at what's wrong is to see some disturbing things. And to be disturbed is healthy. To be completely unfazed by it is psychotic. So the goal here is not to try to feel better about what's wrong, but starting to notice that if I'm doing a wrong that I can't right, the chances are I'm seeing a lot of wrong in the world that I'm making up and missing the actual wrong, so I have nothing to do with it in any constructive way.
So my disturbances that I feel, whatever large or small, are rather based in my lack of, because I misunderstand or don't fully comprehend everything that is.
You do.
Let's say I do, but I
Yes,
don't
do.
admit that I do. I don't consciously.
You don't
admit,
think you do.
I don't think I do.
Yes.
I don't think that I understand everything.
Yeah.
So
Well, you may not understand everything, but knowing doesn't include understanding or
okay.
thinking.
All right. I'll go
Right.
with that.
So intuition, by definition, is knowledge beyond reason. So reason is a function and reason and understanding are consequences of thought, analysis. So knowing doesn't have either of those. It just knows. What would it have to think about? It knows everything.
Right. Okay, so knowing
So you know.
would be would be the essence that when I am disturbed, I am losing faith in. I don't. I believe somehow, and my thoughts want me to believe, or can lend me to believe, that the knowing is not available. That I must somehow, more than intuit, I must even invent it. I must somehow come up with some personal explanation for why things don't seem to be working.
So feelings follow thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're feeling bad and you think your thoughts are truth and reality, you think that you're losing faith in that absolute knowing that doesn't require your faith to even be absolutely knowing. It doesn't require faith. It doesn't ask faith. You know where our faith goes? Into our thinking. Thinking more is going to solve this. Thinking more, thinking I need to get there. Thinking I need to feel. If I'm feeling bad, my feeling is talking about a thought that I'm having that's bad. It's not talking about who I am as bad. It's saying it's like you picked up the wrong wrench. The bolt isn't telling you you're an idiot. It's just saying the wrench doesn't fit. You're not going to be able to tighten me or unscrew me. It's telling me that. It isn't speaking, but in its functional capacity not to function, it's telling me something's wrong with what I'm doing. It's exactly what we do with thinking. So thinking is something humans do in brains. Beings are something humans are that aren't based in space and time. They're just present nature. It's just a present absolute nature. How could the essence of something that's absolute have any byproduct that doesn't share the same essence? It'd be impossible, right? And yet we've been thinking about our thinking being the source for so long. We think if we don't think things are right, we need more faith, when in fact we're already struggling with faith, having too much faith in what we're thinking.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of like courage. You know what courage is? The absence of being discouraged. You know what discouraging is? Constantly trying to do the wrong thing over and over again, hoping it'll be right. There's no easier way to create that. When you talk about your thoughts happening to you, like your thoughts do this, think of how we've created our own thoughts that we've been given, that we choose to think about. We're free to think whatever we want. We think are doing it to us. That's convenient. That's a nice way to feel like I'm a victim to what I'm actually choosing to think, and thinking that I have nothing to do with it. Wouldn't that help perpetuate the story that we need to get somewhere else when there's nowhere else to ever get and nothing else to ever have? JP, good morning.
Morning. I'm gonna use this thing. Wait. Good morning.
Good morning. We hear you fine.
Huh? Happy New Year.
Thank you. Every day. You too. So Douglas, part of this, something I wanted to mention today, everybody knows they know. We've just been so preoccupied with our attention drawn to, and I would say, my experience, I wanted my thoughts to appear that way so I could keep feeling like I wasn't doing what I was doing, so I could keep promoting the story that someday it'll get better if I just do more of the insane thing. I wanted it. It's a perfect setup. It's like a CIA operative saying, good, I've got him confused. I'm not trying to tell him the truth. I'm trying to give him an impression that's not real. And I'm doing that within my own experience and my own thinking. And then the lens of my life, the lens of my view of the world is discolored by that. And everything I see out there is wrong. And how do I ever make it right? How do I ever fit in? And what's incredible is that as a species, we've actually survived on the basis of this kind of thinking and come up with all sorts of things that are pretty innovative. But in almost every case, there's a byproduct that nobody wanted to mention when that was originally created, like nuclear energy and nuclear bombs and the toxins, the industrial pollutants and all that kind of stuff. And we didn't want to look at that. We just wanted to say, look at us, look at what we can do today. Plastic's a great example. We keep talking about not using plastic. We use, I think it's 5% more plastic. We use 450 million metric tons of plastic a year we create. And we talk about not wanting to use it. There's no way to get rid of that. So it's breaking down into particulates that are so small that the fish are eating them, and we eat the fish, and we now have plastic in our systems. And that might actually help with the radiation. So who knows? And the other pollutants, that may end up being a byproduct of it. Now, I'm not saying we're condemned. I'm saying we do things that are short-sighted and have long-term consequences that we want to avoid. And if we are right now in the present moment, which I would suggest we are, we can't be anywhere else. We are at the forefront of everything that has ever happened anywhere anything has ever happened right now. Simultaneously, everything that has ever happened is in fact our experience of what's happening right now.
Spearheads of God's ever advancing creation.
We're like the light on the front of a locomotive. It doesn't know how it's going or what's driving it, but it knows what it sees. We just know what's there. It doesn't have to know how much power is behind it and who's doing the throttle. We just know that we're there and we are here. And to talk honestly about this actually would allow a knowing nature to begin utilizing aspects of nature in ways that are healthy, exactly the way nature uses nature. Nature doesn't decide, a tree in the forest doesn't say, you know what? Fuck all these other trees. I'm going to take all the water. Let's see how that works. They take what they need every day, every moment, only what they need. And what do they need? A little bit to grow a little bit more. Not to suggest there aren't things in nature that wipe trees out and bacterias and all kinds of stuff that develop that can be harmful. But interesting about those things is that as that progression is made, it tends to create a stronger nature that's more durable, more readily responsive to the environment it's in. And it's exactly the way our DNA is based. Our DNA adapts. And if we through history have been adapting under the weight of anxiety and stress, then all of the anxiety disorders that keep growing, the list keeps growing, are consequences of our bodies trying to deal with what's impossible to ever resolve. And the allergies, think of the allergies, the things where, people used to eat wheat. They can't eat wheat anymore. Part of it's probably because it's been grown in ways that aren't healthy because it was easier to grow in greater amounts and be able to eat more of it when what we were eating more of had less and less nutritive value. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a chemist or bioscience, but I can follow the way my life went and see that macro application out there in the world. As my world now, as one that I would like to infect or affect in a way that isn't infected. So if that natural knowing basis is ours and the choices we make in thought, which interestingly, choice is will, and it always includes something we want, and it always comes with an expectation that we're going to get something at least close to what we were heading toward. So to try to get over expectations is useless. If you never have any will anymore and you never have any wants, you'll have no expectations, unless you just start allowing that you're going to make a decision and what happens will happen as it happens. Doesn't mean you can't be there instrumental in guiding things in a direction you'd like them to go. It just means that your awareness of where it's going as it's going is more important than what you originally thought it should be doing. And when people say, I have no expectations, it's easy to remind them that having no expectations is in fact an expectation. So this thing we think we need to escape is not what we're talking. We're not talking about not thinking. We're not talking about not facing challenges. We're not talking about sitting in a dark room next to a babbling brook so we can feel better about how easy the world is. We're talking about starting to recognize that we have an absolute peaceful nature in the face of what can appear to be great calamity. Doesn't mean our serenity is rocked. It means our thinking is rocked in relation to our applicable, purposeful, useful interaction and interchange and exchange with the world and all its people and all its things. We're struggling on that point. We're scraping. Desperation as a source is natural when I'm relying on thinking and ignoring an absolute knowing nature. Of course, I'm desperate. Why wouldn't I feel low self-esteem when I'm relying on the least possible potential and claiming it's the only thing I have to do? That's exactly what addiction is. It's the only thing I can do. It's interesting that we say we have no other choice when we choose to have no other choice to give us the impression the only thing we can do is the worst thing. That's just so twisted. And we talk about it openly and don't think, oh, that's actually a choice. I'm choosing to choose. I don't have a choice. That's crazy. Choice always allows, by the way, not only anything possible to be chosen, including what's possible being impossible. We can choose that. We're free. It also always allows not to be chosen. Always. It wouldn't be choice if it had to be chosen. And we wouldn't be talking about not having a choice. If it weren't a choice, we'd simply be acting on the thing that we knew to do. We'd be busy doing it. We wouldn't be sitting around talking about it. We wouldn't be trying to explain ourselves away to somebody. But think of the word self-consciousness. You know what that means? You would think a self with consciousness would be pretty elevated in this universe. It would be a being, right? What does it mean? Great regard, undue regard for appearance. Why would we be worried about how we look if how we looked was how we thought we looked, rather than how we thought we should look or do look as a result of ideas we have and that we're promoting? Why would we be concerned? Why are we self-conscious? We're embarrassed. It's natural. It's nothing less than that. So obsessive thinking is unraveled by starting to see that what it's doing, it can't ever do. And it isn't about not doing it. It's about starting to see that we're absolutely free to do it. We're absolutely free to go insane. We can do insane things and make believe they're sane. If I can think that what's happening isn't happening and that I shouldn't be where I am, which is like saying that what's happening isn't happening and that I could possibly be somewhere else, like you were talking about the faith, Douglas. All of the things that I'm doing with my thinking, I start projecting onto this other thing and think what I need is more faith in a God. Well, God doesn't need my faith. God isn't going to be less God because I don't vote for him. The whole point of freedom is that I can do what I want. And you know where that freedom comes from? Love. And you know what's interesting about that? In addiction, we say we have no other option, so we do the worst thing. And we're condemned to the worst thing. We can't stop. Of course we can stop. We just don't want to stop thinking we can't stop because it's a convenient excuse to continue to do the same thing because it's pretty lame to admit that we've been idiots for years. It's just not something people tend to do well. But within love, if we're condemned to love, how bad is that? If we're condemned to having everything, think of it. There's no condemnation in that because there's no exclusion in that. There's no limitation in that because now it's showing that the absolute becomes absurdly apparent when you start applying the same kind of thinking that goes into addiction and look at it from the other point of view. Imagine being condemned to having everything. Who would complain? The idea is stupid. We don't even talk about it, but we talk about having only one option, which is the worst option. It's the only thing I can do. I can't stop. Oh, well, poor you. You've carved out a niche in the universe of impossibility, which, by the way, is impossible. That's why they call it impossible. If you just line up the words we use, you'll see it's like the getting away with it. I thought I was getting away with it. When it comes to mental issues, we are getting away with them. Wherever we go, they go. And you know, the other beauty is that when you're dealing with something that's absolute, that isn't spatially bound, it happens to be wherever we are. We don't have to wait for God to show up. We don't have to wait for God's answer. And we use God as a name to address this essence that can't be. God doesn't go around saying, I'm God. Who do you think you are? I'm God. You can't talk to me that way. God doesn't wear a label. He doesn't have a name tag on the door, you know. It's an essence that's so pure and so absolute that nothing in it ever changes because there's nothing unknown, undone. It's all done. It's all, there isn't even any doing in it. It's just a presence of being that's absolute. That's our heritage. That's our essence. To think otherwise is to think like sailors thought about the horizon when they sailed near the shore and thought because they couldn't see over it, it must mean doom. When my suspicion is what they knew was the thought they were thinking was doomed. The horizon of their limited thought was doomed, and the immediacy of the impact was, let's blame it on the horizon. And the irony of the horizon is you can approach it and you can never get to it. The idea of falling off of it is ridiculous when you're on a sphere. The closer you get to it, the further it moves. And what do you see? Everything that was always there the whole time, that was invisible, that wasn't not there because we couldn't see it, just like whatever that essence is, isn't here because we can't see it. We think we need to understand it before we can agree with it. It doesn't rely on our agreement. This universe is going 14 billion years. It certainly didn't rely on our thought 13 billion years ago. we weren't even thinking that. Seemed to know what to do to get here, to get to the point where we started thinking. We've been thinking in terms that are completely self-centered, as though it's true and real, and that there's a self-centered, and all it is a self-centered and thought thinking of itself. We have misused the greatest asset we've been given, which is the freedom of choice, free will, and turned it on ourselves so the thinking we do becomes the greatest threat to our survival when we have instincts that are designed to help us survive and thrive. And it's something we're doing, each of us, and it isn't something I can tell you how to do, because the reckoning, just like the choice to continue to do what we do wrong, is always with the individual. The freedom is that that's what we each have, is choice. And in a knowing nature, there is no choice, because there's nothing to choose. It's everything's there. It's all absolute. So the problem is only coming from what we're thinking about that thing and what we're thinking about our thinking. That's it. Simple. So that's it. So the New Year's resolution, think of what resolution is. Apparently, solving problems we've never resolved. Every year. Why don't they last? Because we're still willing to continue to do the stupid shit that gets us to do the things we think we don't want to do. We think that loop is happening to us. We don't see it as something that we're setting up. Just like if we were putting half water in the gas tank and wondered why the car ran so poorly and kept going to the dealer and saying, you sold me a lemon. This is a horrible car. We're choosing it. We're acting on it. And it just goes around and around and around. And it appears to us it's the only thing happening. And as a result, if we start thinking about it as all that's happening, pretty soon the only thing happening in our world is what we're thinking. And that confirms once again, we're right. Thinking is reality. That's just another layer of insanity. I appreciate the silence here because I know that, when this all started, it was generally arguing during the silent periods because there were so many thoughts people were fighting for. And I think as a group, as some of this has begun to kind of sink in, and not even sink in, but it starts to. Katie's niece, who's 9 years old, Katie was just back with her niece back east, and her niece has read 200 books. She's 9 years old. The kid's brilliant. And she struggles emotionally. And I had a conversation with her once, and I said, you probably struggle with the fact that most adults don't think the way you do. and that your thoughts are right. And when they don't listen to you, you think they don't see you. And she said, yeah, that's exactly right. She said, nobody ever listens to me. And I said, they're actually listening. They just don't agree with you. They have their own thoughts. And I said, you have your own thoughts, and thoughts are thoughts. And I said, when you read a book, you get to imagine all the characters and all the locations and all the houses and all the interactions. And that's all yours. And it's probably what you love about books. And she said, you're right. I love that. Nobody tells me what to do in there. And I said, yeah. So I said, the struggle has nothing to do with your mom and everybody else, because everybody's doing exactly what you're doing. So she said we had an amazing conversation. I mean, she's so brilliant, and she lit up. But when Katie was back there, now this is months later, and she said, you know, Auntie Katie, I really appreciated my conversation with Uncle Jack. And he said some things that I felt were right, but I really don't understand. So we can have an experience where we know something's right and then be in a quandary over how to understand it when it's already right. We've been trying to have understanding be our source of reality and truth. Understanding come to these absolute terms. And the best way to begin to do that is say, I don't have to understand it to know it. That my knowing nature isn't in thought. It's a knowing nature that I always have. And I've often heard, and I think, Douglas, you came to me from a group of 6 people, Dee Dee and Loretta and Sharon, and there were 2 other people, but 4 have followed up after a meeting that I spoke to about this. And 4 of you said, I felt something was right, but I'd like to understand it better.
Right.
And that distinguishes our knowing nature. That's telling me what I've learned, what really came out of that a couple months ago, was that knowing nature is that confirmation of we know something's right, and we can't make sense out of it because we've been making so little sense for so long. We're trying now to wrap those thoughts around this, and they don't fit. They don't fit. So we're still trying to take the lead of our own thinking rather than say, wait a minute, the rightness, if I just sit with that, will expand my awareness, and my thoughts will start coming naturally because they'll be following that, because they've known it all along. I've just been misusing them. I've been abusing myself, literally. Self-abuse is this internal trauma I create, making believe that somehow I'm going to get it right in thought, when it's been right all along in my essence. And who I am is not that self I think of. And it doesn't mean I can't think of a self. It simply means that I keep relying on it as my soul self, and that my brain and my body is the exclusive nature of my existence, rather than recognizing it's a product of existence. It's a product of an essence that we all share that isn't visible and yet is known. And that rightness and that awareness, for her to see that at 9, because Katie laughed too, is pretty profound. And my sense is when I talk to kids, they get this so much quicker, but they don't always understand it for very long, because they kind of go back into what they're learning, and they're in association with all kinds of other people that are carrying on this other conversation and trying to fit into that conversation. And most of us as infants knew better and had a sense of dislocation with what was going on around us because of that commitment people had to the thinking rather than the knowing. The awareness of the knowing in a kid is perfectly clear. They don't speak, but they know how to cry to get fed. They know how to cry to get their diapers changed. They have an innate knowing that is their language at that point of exactly what to do. And they know that the people around them are going to probably help them. Pretty amazing. They're not thinking very much, but they have a knowing sense that helps them survive and gets them through to the point that we're here today talking about. So my sense is there's no time in that infinite state, so there's no age. So we are all youthful, regardless of age. The fountain of youth that Cortez or whoever it was that was looking for is essentially recognizing an infinite absolute spirit, whatever it is. Spirit is even just a word that we use that creates, ghosts can be spirits. So that may not be exactly right, but words are never going to define this, but that knowing nature doesn't need definition to know it knows. And so talking about it becomes an exercise, or a practice in beginning to engage on that level so our thinking can start actually expressing what we know rather than simply what it thinks it should know or knows in some kind of fistive way, in some kind of fight.
So, Jack,
Yes, sir.
my microphone's on. Good. First off, Ponce de Leon.
Ponce de Leon. Right. Thank you.
I wanted to first thank you for reaching out to me. You first reached out to me in March and left me a message at a troubled time, and I didn't return your call. And then a week or so ago, or a few days ago, you reached out to me again in a most loving way, which is hard for me to understand. What's his angle? What's he trying to sell me? What is this? So
how much do you have?
more than I can use. So we talked for an hour a couple of days ago, and just like your 9-year-old niece, much of what you said, I did not understand in any way, shape, or form, but I knew it was true. It didn't make any sense. And then yesterday I was with my significant other, and we hiked up to the top of Echo Mountain, and we came back down to Pasadena, and we went to see a movie at this theater, I'd pick or something. And we came out onto Colorado Boulevard, and we were looking at the setup for the Rose Parade and all the things. And I said to her, so they turn the corner and they go this way and they march down that. And she said, no, they go east. They march down east. And I said, but this is east here. And she said, no, that's west. You're pointing west. And I said, I was born in LA. I mean, this I've been to Pasadena 100 times. That's east. And she said, no, you're all turned around. That's west. And so this couple were walking by and they said, excuse me, where's west and west east? I mean, because I said, I'd bet you $100, and she said, I bet you my house. And I said, well, hold on a second. So I stopped and asked the where's west, and he pointed in the direction that Charlene was indicating, and the world just started spinning, and I think, what? Because here I am standing on Colorado Boulevard, not knowing where west and east was, and I was so absolutely certain.
But you're hanging out with two idiots who clearly are wrong, right?
Well, I thought they were wrong because they looked. I mean, they were tourists or something, and they're just really confused. But so then everything the world started spinning, and I realized that my reality was based on these thoughts that were completely 180 degrees from what was real, and started thinking about your thoughts that not to trust them and not to believe in them, and that there's reality and there's truth and there are thoughts. And so a little bit of a flash that what the connection between what you were saying to me. And
you can see how quickly, if that thought you had was fought for, other people end up becoming victims to our own cause, because we will claim they're wrong, so wrong as to begin to, this is human history.
Well, not just that. So I spoke to my sisters later. We had an 8-hour discussion, Charlene and I, about up between Echo Mountain and down in the movie theater, and afterwards about what went wrong in our relationship, because we're currently separated. And I thought it was because the problems were hers, and she had some serious character flaws. And so she tried for 8 hours to explain what the problems were, and she said, why don't you get a second opinion? And so during my New Year's Eve calls to my sister Colleen and Dee Dee. I explained my point of view and Charlene's point of view, and they both said, God, I like this woman. I'm 110% behind Charlene. She's right, and you're just absolutely wrong. And it's like the whole Colorado Boulevard thing with the what? And Colleen and Dee Dee, really like and admire me. And they both said, you're just so off base and wrong that you're just like what? I mean, this woman's standing up for what's right and true, and you're just like you're absolutely confused and wrong and unethical and et cetera, et cetera. It just anyway, an eye-opening day. So
Probably both eyes.
Comes back to the thoughts that you were trying to explain to me about a lot of our problems. And I was adamant, I was willing to argue about the East, West, and Colorado Boulevard. And I was so adamant about Charlene being wrong and have these character flaws and being possessive and jealous, this and that, and that I caused a very valuable and important relationship to collapse because of my beliefs that I was right, my thoughts. And the reality was that with her, I almost always felt a joy that I'd never felt before in my life, just being with her. But because of my thoughts, I allowed it to destroy what was real. So even though I didn't understand anything of what you were saying,
You got it.
I sensed that it was true, and it's anyway. It's funny that the teacher suddenly appears going, "You need a lesson." It's like, huh.
Well, and we're all doing that, Chris. We're all interacting in a way that gives us the chance to learn, and that same resistance that you had is an unwillingness to learn. And the fact is, there's always something to learn in whatever we're doing, in terms of it being whatever we're doing, whenever we're doing it, has never happened before. It's all happening for the first time. So there's always something there that we could look at with fresh eyes, because we're seeing things new. It's always new, right? So any limitation we've ever had is always going to allow us a greater view. But a couple of things to mention, because I take the words and why I take the words, and I don't criticize what people say. I'm using it to help us see that we have created a language around things to make things appear to be understandable to other people who are also thinking some pretty twisted things, which may seem innocuous, but it's very telling that we say things in ways that we don't even think we're saying. Like one of the things you said all of a sudden the world was spinning. So that's been happening for about 4 billion years. It did not start when you happen to notice that but you notice the free fall that occurs when you begin to realize that lockstep with your thinking is being let go of. All of a sudden, there's a sensation that is very different than the fight.
It's called disorientation. It
was
was the vertigo and disorientation. The orient is the Latin word for the east. So
that's funny.
Cut off from the east. I was looking west.
So think of your orientation and thought being a position you've taken about how things are, and think that that's who you are. And you now are in a relationship explaining all this stuff you think to someone else as being who you are, when you're missing that essence you have with her, and she's missing that essence she has with you, because you're arguing over what you like and don't like rather than what's actually true and real, which would be the love and the connection and the absolute knowingness of that awareness. So what's beautiful about that is you don't need anybody to have that with everybody. They don't have to obey you. They don't have to follow you. They don't have to live with you. You don't have to end up taking her house, and she doesn't need your $100 to make that possible, right? Those are all just legal things that happen in the world when we get married and do all this stuff to think we're loving somebody because now we're married, but basically we've just signed a contract that the state's in charge of our relationship. That's kind of like, that's trouble. If we can't manage it on our own, we're probably not going to do a lot better with somebody else who doesn't even know us starting to make decisions for us. But the point isn't against marriage. The point is that we have a knowing nature of connection with people. We don't express it well. That disorientation suggests that your orientation that you thought was true was being challenged. And that sense of the world spinning is starting to say, oh, I'm on a spinning world. I'm already going round and round. My thoughts are already going round and round. I've been doing this for years. This isn't new. I'm just getting a chance to actually gain the perspective to actually notice what I'm doing. And that's a thank you to your sisters and Charlene for having the chance to actually step back and say, wow. So a little tip, what I learned, when anybody challenges me, they're always right. There is no fight and right, ever. You know why? Because it just works. You can choose to fight, and you can think there's a fight, you can argue over it, but those are all choices to think about it in ways that aren't true. Our natural, if the essence of this essence we're talking about is responsible for all of everything that exists, then our essence is responsible, period. If I didn't exist, none of it would bother me. The fact that I exist, anything that bothers me is on me. Anything I'm doing with anyone else is on me. There's always room for growth and understanding when it comes to thinking. And there's nothing wrong with thinking and understanding and reason at all. It's misusing it that it seems to turn against us. And we are the choosers of that misuse and the abuse. Abnormal use is abuse. We choose that. Now, if you want to cry over something and mourn something and grieve over something, it's probably all of the opportunity you had to witness things accurately that you missed in the preoccupation of that thinking you did when you were with people you knew you loved and didn't know how to even say it. And you know where that lives? Pretty much for us in our heart area, in our stomachs, in our backs, in our tension in our neck. All that stuff we've done to try to keep that charge from being visible, we've worn on our bodies as they've gotten tense and tight and don't stretch very well and break as a result of the pressure and the inflammation. Think of the grandiosity of ego. It's an inflammation in the body. Constricts our ability to have our oxygen flow, the blood flow, the organs function, everything. Our entire existence as humans is put at risk in the name of trying to save the life of something that doesn't exist, other than what we think. And if we're capable of doing that and surviving, which we've done pretty well, there's 8 billion people, apparently 7.9 this month, I believe. That's a lot of success when it comes to procreation and feeding. As much as there are people that are in need, there still are that many people alive. That's pretty significant. We've seemed to overcome it, which tells me there's a natural thriving nature to our ability to overcome all of these internal obstacles that we've created and still end up productive in some way. Now imagine if those instabilities internally were stabilized. Why? It's not because we're trying to make them better by feeling better about what we're doing wrong. It's to start to see, why do I continue to create delusions out of illusions and make believe they're true? Illusions aren't problems. I can imagine anything I want. When I think it's true, it becomes delusional. That's insanity. If I start operating on a sane basis, all of a sudden I start being productive in ways I can't even imagine because things start happening in ways that I never would have thought, because all I thought was the worst case was going to happen because all I was thinking was with the worst possible thought or orientation. So instability is a recognition of stability. We wouldn't notice it if we weren't stable. It's like slipping on ice. If the ice was moving with us, we would not be slipping. It's the fact that the ice is still that allows us to slide over it. And we can do that gracefully, or we can kill ourselves in the same action. The beauty about this is that it's not new and it's always new. Whatever we call old isn't happening. It's thought of. It's only history in our minds, in our thoughts, in our memories. It's never what it was because there's no way to remember everything that's happening when we can't even see everything that's happening, but we know it's happening now. So this moment can't be replicated, nor need it be replicated because it's already full. And so too will every other moment be full. There's nothing I need to do to complete them or help them or fill them ever. So the chance to see this stuff, while it discounts the entire investment we've made in making believe someday those thoughts we had will come true and we'll find somebody. If you find somebody who falls in love with the self you think you are, run like hell. Get to the other side of the planet quick. Because you have taken the lack of safety in your own environment and compounded it exponentially by 1. So the essence of what we're doing is starting to see that there is a natural attractiveness to freedom and love. And there's a natural repulsion to lies and pretense and excess and all of the things that try to pretend to be things rather than are things. Doesn't mean we can't have things. It doesn't mean fashion isn't wonderful. Doesn't mean we can't have a better car. I love cars. I think it's one of the greatest things humans have come up with. To just be able to buzz around and transport yourself around and watch everybody else drive like idiots and still get where you're going. I mean, it's incredible that we have all that. And yet we also struggle with the consequences of those things and the byproducts of those things. So if we're trying to feel better about what we're doing that's wrong, we're treating symptoms, and symptoms being treated ignores the disease. And we're looking at the disease as something happening where we are now. So to the responsibility point, Chris, if we're responsible and just begin to concede that we're responsible, doesn't mean we can't think irresponsibly, doesn't mean we can't act irresponsibly, it doesn't mean we can't feel bad about what we're doing. It means we're certainly free to do all of those things. And when we're doing them, we can simply say, yes, that's me at work. Those are my choices. I chose that. If I'm interfering with somebody, Anthony and I once had a conversation. Anthony's still here. And somebody had said something to him. Yeah. He said, do you think it's possible? And I said to him, if it's being discussed, of course it's possible. Just concede it. It was his brother, I think. Wasn't it, Anthony?
And if we're even discussing it, obviously it's a possibility.
Yeah. Point is that we have these hard edges that we think we need to refine and everybody needs to respect. And for them to respect them would be as insane as they are for us to keep maintaining them. They're just choices, and we're welcome to make them. But when we make them and think they're true, we think everybody steps on our life. And why do people keep walking on me? And why can't I ever get what I want when I'm dealing with nothing, thinking it's everything? It's a projection of my own creation. We are manifestors. And what people miss about the whole manifest, people say, I want to manifest more. And I say, you've already manifested a complete mess. How much more could you want? We forget that this manifestation of our predicament that seems to be happening to us in a world that seems to be difficult. The world is not difficult. The world is not difficult. The world does not argue with itself at all. It does exactly what it's doing to be in the place and space it is right now, with the sunlight that we need and the air that we need and the atmosphere that we need and all the things we need to even admit, to even argue over whether or not it's complicated, is all being provided to us without thinking. Most of what we think about, and I would suggest all of what we think about that worries us, are things that aren't happening. Why shouldn't it worry us? The worry is an accurate assessment, but what do we think we need to do? Worry more to figure it out. That's going to help. What I need to do is go home and spend a couple of days alone and think about this harder and further. That's a drinker's dream. That's the perfect rationalization, to go home and get a case of beer, case of whiskey, whatever, and just drink themselves to death. People have been doing it for thousands of years. It's happening on our streets today in numbers that it's never happened before. And nobody's happening to notice that if it's getting worse, maybe we're not doing something about it that's correct. Maybe. What do? Double down more. What are they doing now? They're giving hallucinogenics to people who are struggling with drugs. Well, why not just give them more heroin? and fentanyl. Just why, if you're going to kill them, just give them the thing they already want. Don't give them something new. Don't give them methadone, give them the heroin. That's easy to produce. It's insanity when it's looked at accurately. And to not look at it accurately is insanity.
It's like a Twilight Zone marathon.
Exactly. For anyone who remembers the Twilight Zone. We, as individuals, have the choice. It's all what we do, not what I do, what I say. I say much of this wrong, I'm sure. I only aim my words in a direction to begin to consider that if you already know it, you know it. And if I can aim that light in any direction, and you'll know you know it. And the reminder itself is enough to know that if you thought you were hiding it, I know better with you that you're not. And that none of us ever have been. All of the anxiety and all of the defective relationships and all of the struggles and all of the pain and woe that we talk about that shaped our life is exactly a replication of the dysfunctional thinking we've been doing. All of those things are filled with college grade courses in understanding how things work, if we're willing to look at them accurately and honestly. And if we're not, we're going to consider them a plague and something happening to us, and our thoughts are intrusive and they attack me and my brain attacks me. And like, my brain has never gotten up in the morning without me. And I think it can attack me. That's just silly. So a lot of this can be very funny looking at it, but it also reveals some very disturbing aspects of the fact that we have, not just currently, but we've developed this cultural tendency of making believe that all that's happening is what we're thinking about, when we ignore other things that are happening. And so we misread things and mistake things and have misgivings as a result, naturally. All of the symptoms we suffer from are absolute consequences of the doingness we're doing and the thinking we're doing. And thinking is actually a doing. Thinking is something we do. It's an action. It's a primary action. If the thinking is screwed up, the subsequent feelings are going to feel screwed up. And the action we take to get over the feelings, rather than admit the feelings or admitting that something's wrong with the thinking, are going to be screwed up. It just works in that direction perfectly. So perfectly that if you look at it once, you start seeing that you've probably done that several thousand times in multiple different instances, so that you don't have to think of the individual thoughts and the individual people and all of the instances that would seem so impossible to ever recover memory of, to see it all disappear like that. And to that point, at the bottom of this week's announcement, and let me pull it up because anyone listening may want to listen too. There's a Dr. Bruce Grayson at Virginia University back east who was interviewed along with another guy for an NPR story on life after death, like these near-death experiences. And what's interesting is we seem to need near-death experiences to actually witness this absolute knowing sense. And I would say that's just a convenience of denial, making believe that if we don't get near death, we don't have to actually face life. And my sense is those things people witness that are perfectly beautiful. He said, and if you listen to this recording, it's about 30 minutes or so. And let me see if I can find it really quick. He said that these experiences have been discussed around the world by people of every culture, every type, every size, every kind, almost unanimously and identically. And it defies science that people would witness such things. And yet he spent 50 years researching it. It's called How a Near-Death Experience Could Change the Way You Live. And it was on NPR. And if you put that into Google, I'm sure you can find the 30-minute or so. There's a story written and also it came up in my Apple News. How a near-death experience could change the way you live. So what he said was, interestingly, exactly what Carl Jung said about recovery from addiction. It requires a psychic change. And what Dr. Bruce Grayson said was that the psychic change that occurs, and he wasn't talking about this, I'm not trying to attribute his talk to what we're talking about in terms of addiction and mental obsession, but I'm seeing it as something that is very clearly aligned with what we're talking about. Carl Jung said that it takes a psychic change for somebody to recover from alcohol. So Bill Wilson picked that up, right? And that psychic change isn't something anybody can do for anybody else. So here again is this freedom of autonomy that we have to make decisions, this potential that we each have to either sit in the juice and boil or get out of the pot and start actually looking at things and saying, wow, I don't feel comfortable. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to start noticing what it is that's happening, and I'm going to start acting in accordance with it rather than continue to fight and fight and fight for these ideas that I have that I always think about when I'm alone, that I'm going to perfect in some way when people are around me, and I never seem to get it done. But what he said that was interesting, given that he's a scientist, he said, I have no scientific proof, but I have enough evidence to know that this is happening. He said, if it was a hallucination, there would be no long-term benefit to the experience. He said, but what's interesting is that people who go through that come out of it changed. And in the instance they use in the story, the daughter of the guy who came out of it, who had no fear of death afterwards, had a whole different orientation. She said, I kind of miss my father. He used to be crotchety and grumpy, and now he's not. She connected to those aspects of him as thinking of them as who he was, and they vanished in the process of this experience he had facing this. If you listen, you'll hear his description. It's much better than me. But the witness of that is where we stand now. And the denial of it is what keeps us from admitting it and seeing the bounty of it. That's it. Denial is psychic Novocaine. It unleashes all kinds of chemicals in our body that are reserved for emergencies, for real emergencies. Because our body knows something is seriously wrong, and we know something is seriously wrong when we're anxious and we're stressed and we're depressed. We know it, and the sick idea is to get over it rather than begin to utilize it as evidence of a greater knowing sense that's giving us an experience, allowing us the clarity of seeing that those things are happening as a result of something we're doing, not who we are, but something we're doing with what we have. And what do we have that's primary to everything we do? Thoughts. So we do not need to die to see our life flash in front of us. We do not have to face that moment as an end moment. We can face that moment now. And I would suggest we're facing that moment right now. And what we're making of this moment that isn't allowing that awareness is how entrenched we are and committed we are to this thinking we've been doing is all there is to do. And I would add that most of what we're struggling with is thinking we're doing that we don't think we're doing. The stuff that we're doing is pretty easy to identify. We can look at that pretty quickly. But it's this other layer of things we have buried, thinking they're buried, thinking they have no impact on it, that catch us off guard, give us impressions that are untrue, create haunting images and psychosis of phobias that all of a sudden erupt. We don't know why, we say, because we're afraid that somebody will find out that we've been burying our own sense of responsibility in something that has actually been expressing itself. It's never been hidden because it's been expressing itself in all of the dysfunctional symptoms that have been plaguing me for my whole life. The depression, the antagonism, the reactiveness, the denial, the defensiveness, all that kind of stuff are examples of my preoccupation with trying to keep a thought down, as though I think I used the example of going to the beach with kids and they're looking for the beach ball and the dad's in the water holding it under the water saying he doesn't know where it is. It's the same thing we do with thoughts. We think they're hidden, but they're not. They're expressing themselves in all these symptomatic experiences and addictions and all this, and the allergies and all the stuff that our bodies have dysfunctioned on. Now, allergies may not correct in a lifetime because DNA, gets transferred. But if we are causing anxiety for others by being anxious, we are actually diminishing their body's capacity to function better. So if they do have kids, they're going to pass on those effects of that anxiety, just like cattle pass on the antibiotics, and chickens, when they're filled with drugs that try to get them fatter faster so they can weigh more, we end up eating that stuff at the other end of what the farmer thinks is successful. But it ends up being the detriment of the whole purpose of the chicken and the cow is to eat, and we end up eating food that's deficient because we're eating the drugs that allowed it to get fatter. We may be paying less for it, but we're paying more for it as a result. We've been doing this a long time. It's probably not going to unravel instantaneously. And at the same time, it's never been raveled when it comes to this absolute source, ever. It's never been bound up. It's never been a noose. It's always been just what we've been doing, and think it'll take a long time because we've been so good at pushing it off and thinking. I mean, think of reincarnation. Maybe we reincarnate, I don't know. But if the point is to come to terms with your life, it would be a pretty good indication that if I believe in reincarnation, I'm waiting for another life to finally face what I'm unwilling to face today.
In Laos, there's like a huge band of people in the street and shooting off fireworks.
We've got some talking going on in the background. So our capacity isn't limited by any other thing other than what we think. And thinking doesn't have to conclude reality to express reality and express truth. Doesn't even have to understand it. As a matter of fact, it probably never will understand it, which is a good sign, because then we're expressing something that is beyond thought and reflects that knowing nature that isn't thinking and doesn't have reason and doesn't understand either. Which is why in sobriety, people actually start witnessing things they never thought possible for their life. They're not busy messing it up, so things get better naturally. This discussion is about the obsession that's left once we stop the symptoms. The drinking, the drugging, the sex, anything that we're doing that's compulsive. And I'm not suggesting that we won't have compulsions, but when you see compulsions, you'll know what they are. As you begin to get honest, you'll start seeing, oh, I must be running from a thought I don't want to face. It's as simple as that. You don't have to understand the thought. You don't have to get to the bottom of it. You don't have to think, the first thing I like to do is attach it to somebody near me so I can start blaming them for doing the thing I don't want to admit. How dare you? When people say, well, you hurt my feelings, no. Your feelings were hurting and I just mentioned it. I actually gave you a chance to have some perspective on what's going on rather than give you the chance. I kill you by making believe that what you're hurting over should be ignored. Because you're going to hurt so much, you're going to kill yourself to prove you're right.
That's right. Hallelujah.
Morning, Loretta.
Good morning. Hold on. Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. And let me tell you, hallelujah. I mean, I'm telling you, hallelujah. And, I firmly believe, I was told right from the get-go, and my sponsor will say this to me every day, so I know I have to be astute. But if we pray for the willingness to be open-minded, and we don't really know at that time to be open-minded about what about, but it comes, it allows my brain to reorganize. And my sponsor told me I was going through a psychic change. It's not an awakening to me. It's more of I'm sorry, I missed your reading. So, but I heard your spill. So, but it's not really, like an awakening to me. It's more of like a process. It's been a process. And like I'm able to use different words, communicate better, understand.
Mm-hmm.
And, my background, I was a very entitled, spoiled child. So I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what the word support means or what it looks like, but I can do that now. I can see that. I saw that last night for the first time, and it was just like, Lord. And, I certainly don't know what empathy is or unconditional love. I was too busy getting sunburned, and to do these things, to go out and work with charities or, stuff like that. But unconditional love is just, it is such a gift. And I have never really known how to see it enough to give it. So that, to me, all these little things that are kind of falling into place and my brain is getting more organized.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you're talking about or not, but.
Well, the process, any process is occurring in a relative concept. So thoughts are a process. Right. When we're thinking about thinking, it's always a process because we're always trying to think better about the thinking we're thinking of. Right. So it's always a process. So what the infinite state of being does not have a process in it at all. It just is. So love, it's interesting that we've created this idea of unconditional love as though normal love is conditioned. That's not true.
I think there's a difference. I do.
Well, no, I guarantee you there's a difference. One doesn't exist and the other is all there is. So you're right.
I don't think so, Jack.
I understand. I understand. And I understand how thinking will invade the terms of absolute knowing to try and think that the rightness of the thought transcends the absolute being nature of the essence. But if you think of love, it's naturally unconditional. That's what love is. We've created unconditional love because we're so used to conditioning the love we give, which isn't, by the way, love. That's a contractual obligation. That's a master-slave relationship we create with people, and wonder why it doesn't tend to work well. Of course it doesn't work well. It's not true. It doesn't have any basis. It's a man-made conflict waiting to explode.
Yes, it is.
So
it's almost like that changed for me, where the empty love that I was giving, because I didn't know how to receive love in the first place. So when that happened, I didn't have to think about it. I just knew. And so when that occurred is when I was talking with someone last night that was, had this. I've been through this too, where your identity by your family is cut out for you. And also the victim chair, and I didn't know what they were doing because they were so manipulative. And I didn't come from a manipulative family. So anyway, I was able to get out of that, but she isn't. And it's if you replace it with a positive, just like you say, the ship comes to the top.
I didn't say that.
Sharon.
Oh, shoot. Hold on. Okay. Sharon, let me call you right back. Bye-bye. Okay, I'm sorry, Jack. I was supposed to call and tell her.
I don't talk about replacing things with positive because positive reinforces negative, and that's not what we're talking about. But Loretta, a couple points I want to make that you'll struggle with, and I'm going to welcome you to do that. Okay. Not insist, but if you see something in someone else, like the fact that they're manipulative, you wouldn't recognize it and be bothered by it if you didn't do it.
Oh, no, that is not true.
I got it. No, I know. I set this up knowing that you would be pretty sure about your opinion. There's no way you would think of it as being them if you were thinking about it as something you might be doing.
Okay,
and
maybe I would be attacked.
This is a consideration. It's just something to sit with for a minute and say, oh, why would I be bothered by something someone else do? If somebody was speaking Swahili, you probably wouldn't be bothered by what they said, right? But if you spoke Swahili and they said that woman's an idiot.
So.
Oh, you do. Well, then you got it up on me. So I'm giving you this to notice.
Okay.
We have developed all sorts of strategies to make believe we're not doing what we're doing because we're not doing it the way we think they're doing, and we're not doing it in the amount they're doing. So that means we're not doing it while they're the wrong for doing it. That's exactly what we do internally.
Victim seat.
What's that?
They put me in a victim seat, and I
They
put
did, huh? Really?
I did.
Interesting. Wow. There's no victims.
Well, there's not now. So
Well, there's choices to be a victim, but there are no ultimate victims. We're all responsible.
I know, but when you are unenlightened, you can become a victim.
So you're unenlightened. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I went inward. You hurt me, I hurt me. That's what anorexia does, you know?
So some of this, Loretta, you may not understand and you may not like, and I'm going to just suggest you consider it
Okay.
and see if the consideration of it doesn't illuminate. If there's a fight involved in any of this, it's not right, ever. There's no fight here over love. There's no fight here over, you've always been loved by love. You've always had love. You've always been fulfilled by love. To think you aren't is to show how quick we think what we do in our human experience is all that we are and all that is. And that it's only what we thought about what happened that kept us from recognizing the fulfillment that somebody else, somewhere else could potentially give us, when most people are still looking for that person. They never find it. And when they do, it tends to turn into another fucking nightmare.
And you know what? I followed that, Jack.
Yeah. It's just sitting with it, you know,
Yeah.
just starting to kind of unravel a little bit. And I know you're melting. We have had some extraordinary conversations, and you have been a very willing participant, and it does me great good. I mean, it's moving to be in the, it's moving to be in the face of the willingness that allows what we all know to become obvious. It's very moving.
Say that again.
It's moving to be in the face of the willingness that allows us to begin to talk about and express what's obvious, rather than what we think is not obvious. And what we think is obvious are all the problems and all the stories and all the stuff that's wrong and all the people I need to cut out and the toxicity and everybody. I've never been affected by somebody's toxicity that I wasn't toxic over. It's my own toxicity I deny that I find in others, so that I can continue to refuse to accept my own responsibility for the creation and manifestation of the experiences I'm having.
Okay, well, I follow every bit of that, Jack, and thank you. But I just want to clarify something.
Please.
This was about a friend,
I know.
not so.
Loretta, if it's in a story, that story is going to be designed to excuse this situation from somehow being exceptional enough not to apply.
But Jack, I had dropped when my mother died, she took the resentment away. It was like, she just took it.
How about right now?
She took it away. It's not
No,
there.
I'm talking about the people you're telling the story about and justifying the fact that they caused you to be a victim, or they hurt your feelings, or they're manipulative and all that kind of stuff.
No, what I said was, I was able to see differently,
Yes.
And so I knew, I didn't have to think, I knew what to say. And it was unconditional. It was with unconditional empathy and love, because normally I'm confrontational. So it's like I'm changing.
Normally, like now?
Well, she did start the conversation with praying for the willingness to be open-minded, though.
Yes.
Thank you, Anna.
You're welcome.
So the open-mindedness we're talking about is now, and all this other stuff that's going on. And listen, Loretta, I know you've made leaps and bounds. I'm not discounting any of that stuff. My job, as far as I'm concerned, if I have a job, is to stress without stressing the point that an absolute nature is not negotiable or debatable. It's not optional. It's our normal, absolute, healthy, sane essence. All of ours.
Well, I'll tell you this, Jack. I have had some one reason I'm jumping and growing, you say very profound things, and that was very profound. So I thank you for that.
Part of this is the sitting with and the noticing of the impulsive and kind of reactive internal ideas that come up that kind of compel us to excuse and to talk in directions about things not happening, rather than begin to actually witness it and say, wow, this this can be very uncomfortable. I know that discomfort. I experience it every day in many ways. And I look at my environment and ask myself, what is it I'm doing? Or not even asking the question, saying, I'm doing this. This is my environment. I am seeing it as I'm seeing it. I am creating it as I'm creating it. I'm manifesting it as I'm manifesting it. This is my doing. So I can look for the answer, or I can concede the actuality of what's happening and simply begin to notice that I'm actually, as we all are, when I realized I was responsible, I realized so was everybody else. That didn't place an undue burden on me. That placed a potential of enrolling or engaging people around something that we share synonymously and absolutely, without any doubt. Doesn't mean we can't think about it doubtfully. And I would say any of the doubtful thinking we do is simply trying to defend the thinking is more prominent than the actual being in that nature. Not to say we can't do it. I do it all the time, Loretta. I am not chastising or pointing a finger and saying, stop that. I'm saying, let's just look at it. Let's just notice that, wow, we tend to, if we are built on the same platform, we backfire in the same way. We think it's so unique to us in our experience. We're so married to the stories and circumstances that aren't even happening.
Okay, but if your thinking changes,
yes, it's always changing.
Okay, to knowing.
It's all you knowing, but knowing isn't thinking, and that's one of the issues here to look at.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm not thinking. This is coming instinctively.
Okay.
And so is that part of a psychic change? That
yes. Okay. If I'm missing that in what you're saying. But the point is that the knowing never changes.
That's right.
It's always there. And to know that is to know that it's the same for everyone else too, including those people you think are manipulative that you need to get away from.
If they can tap into it.
No. Why would they have to tap? It means that without a tap, we don't have it. We are so capable.
I'm going to tell you, a lot of people are closed-minded that I run into.
You really?
Yes.
Do you have to run into yourself to admit that?
You just ran into a cobweb.
We'll say what?
You just ran into a cobweb.
I know.
Loretta,
I run into it all the time.
Loretta, I am not open-minded enough to be able to have this conversation in a way that actually conveys the essence of these things I'm pointing to. I clearly have my own limitations in my own language. I do this because I'd like to get better at it, not because I'm good at it. The point is that
it took me a year and a half of butting my head against everything and having excuses and finding loopholes and giving specific examples of why my thinking was okay. And then one day I figured out that it was every bit of it was my responsibility. And I called Jack and I was bawling my eyes out and I cried like for a month every day. And then I was liberated. The responsibility was such a huge liberation, but then I was shamed and guilty for thinking that I would have created all that insanity and like defended against it. But once I got through the shame and the guilt and back to the responsibility thing, it was the biggest gift I've ever had in my entire existence as a human.
That's awesome.
But it took a long time. It was like a year and a half. And Jack gave us a lot more leeway than he gives you because he's going faster now. But he would just totally let me tell him these long drawn out stories and hardly ever say, you just concede. But he did. It was just a slower process.
Well, Jack has never let me say a long, drawn-out story.
You know what I learned to do years ago with new guys in sobriety when they'd call and thought that what I really needed to hear was their whole excuse for their life.
Right.
I'd let them go about 20 minutes or so and wouldn't say a word. And as soon as they had a pause, I'd say, "Okay, I'm back." And they would never launch from that point on without saying, "Are you listening?" And I'm saying, "Should I be? What am I listening to? Drivel, do you want to talk about growth and getting down to business here? Do you want to talk about trying to reinforce the thoughts you've had that have made you insane, helped you become insane?" You know, it's a choice. I'm not interested in trying to help people get worse. I don't want to see them die earlier than normal. There's nothing wrong with death, but to do it 30 years in advance simply because we think we're right is probably a problem. unnecessary, and it eliminates our potential to be useful for 30 years.
Well, I don't have to be right anymore. I don't want to be
Okay.
right. I
Okay.
don't want to be right.
Okay. I do.
Well, you're never going to be.
Exactly. But the point is that it's not something to think we don't do. It's something to begin to admit, oh, that's what I'm doing. It's easy to do it. If think of this, Loretta, if everything that's absolute is absolute, and the absolute nature of nature is absolute, and if I understood that and was expressing it, everything I would be doing would be productive. Everything in ways that would be so exceptional that everybody would benefit. There'd be little anybody would have to do to get everything done. Right? It doesn't seem to be the way things are going.
All right. So Jack,
there are, if there is one way to do things, that means every other way is going to be wrong. If there's one way to be going east, like with Chris's thing earlier, that's just the way it is. East is that way. It isn't a debate. It isn't an argument. Can we make one? Absolutely. Can we think we're right? Absolutely. Do I have to stop thinking No, I'm going to continue to do that. And if I realize the friction and the fight, I can also say, oh, I must be on a wrong track. My body is actually giving me like a GPS guidance system when I miss the turn, says, continue to the route. It tells me to make the next turn to get back to the route that I just missed. Our bodies are doing that in the way that the struggles we come up with and the excuses we use are all happening as a consequence of a lack of willingness in the moment to let the moment be the moment. Now, the moment is the moment. And what I'm not doing is allowing it within my thinking to be what it is. So I've created a conflict, not with the moment. I've created a conflict in thought about what I think about the moment and think that it's the moment that's the problem rather than my thinking.
All right. So Jack, I have a question about the brain. Okay.
There we go.
Which is where the thinking begins. So, I decided I don't want to think about it anymore. When these things.
Well, what if you do though? Let's just say you decided that and then it happens. What are you going to do?
Wait a minute. What I'm trying to ask you is it seems, I don't know if I'm going to say this sentence right. If I put my essence and energy to the creative part of my brain, and the right here in the front of your brain is where hope is, and it's like, to me, I think differently,
What's that?
I just begin to, my thoughts are different. My thoughts are beautiful.
Anything you ever do with a thought is going to be different the next moment. Everything and every thought you've ever had has always been different, and everyone has always changed.
Okay, well, mine are beautiful.
Okay.
They're beautiful thoughts. They used to be very destructive,
They used to be.
Yes, they did.
You think the potential for that doesn't exist right now?
Well, what I'm trying to say is, when I get into the creative part of my brain, and I mean like meditate, to bring Picasso in the room, let's say, okay? Mm-hmm. He's been here before. And it's like, but when you get into that part of your brain, I'm less likely to think about self-harm, okay? And I don't think about self-harm. That's an example. Do you think that makes sense? Because,
well, I think you're admitting that you impact how you feel by what you think. And if you can begin to see that, and then realize also that when we think our thinking is really the cure and our thinking is the source, that we're ending up denying the absolute nature of our knowing that is the ultimate creativity and the ultimate innovation and the ultimate uniting force, unified, where everything is absolutely seamlessly whole and complete and beautiful and harmonious, and there's no discord or dissonance or upheaval. That's what thoughts are designed to express, that naturally, without having to go to that side of the brain and leave this side of the brain off the table.
Okay, well,
it's
side
just
of the brain has the soul, the other side has your soul.
But Loretta, you're starting to see that if you can affect your feelings, you're starting to see that thoughts are flexible.
Yes.
And I would say that's a huge step when you used to think all your thoughts were destructive, or that you had destructive thoughts you couldn't seem to get over.
Right.
I'm suggesting, though, anything that we do to deny absolute reality, anything like thinking, I'm never going to think that again, I'm never going to do that again, that's a setup.
Okay.
Because the chances are we're going to have some bad thoughts. We're going to run into circumstances. I have it happen every time I get into my car. There's always an idiot on the road that's doing something I don't think they should be doing because it's interfering with where I think I should be going, the way I think I should be getting there. Always. And I didn't notice that at first. I used to think when I wasn't doing it as bad as I could that I wasn't doing it. And then I started thinking, no, actually, my experience is still fully intact. I'm still struggling over ideas I have about how people should drive. I have a feeling that when somebody's making a left turn, they should go into the intersection before they make the left turn rather than wait at the crosswalk so nobody else can get through the intersection. It seems to me that we'd have a lot less traffic if people actually didn't block the intersections that everyone else is trying to get through but can't. It's just, subtle things like that.
I had a big awakening about that, Jack. I had a very big awakening about driving. I don't shoot the bird anymore because somebody actually pulled over. That I can't tell you. I carry a gun, so and I know how to shoot between the two veins in the leg.
Well, I'm glad you don't have any fight in you.
Hey, I live in Texas. It's normal.
I know. No, it actually is. It keeps people from using guns because they know everybody else has one. It's kind of like nuclear disarmament. Everyone wants to have it. They call it security against using it. So we have, I don't know how many thousands of nuclear weapons on the planet that could blow us up, all in the name of not using them. Well, if we didn't want to use them, why don't we get rid of them?
I think it's called mutually assured destruction, Jack.
Yeah. Well, there's another term for it that's the sort of sovereign assurance of not being attacked because somebody knows you've got a really big weapon you might use. There's one in the opposite direction. But the point is, Loretta, things are going to go where they go, and they're going to include things you probably don't predict. And that's actually the adventure and exploration of what we're doing, rather than attempting to make believe that things are only going to go where we want because we think thoughts are right and real and true. And then everything becomes only what we expect it to be based on that, rather than what it actually is. And there's a lot less friction when you let it go where it goes, and then realize your capacity to actually have things go where you might want them to go increases dramatically compared to when you think that nothing should be going where you want it to be going. It just you start to function better and this interactive awareness that we have in our human body. Our bodies are amazingly designed to function in ways that give us, Chris used the term earlier, it doesn't make sense. And I realized about sense that sense doesn't make sense because it simply provides the brain raw data. And then the body tries to make sense of the sense when the sense didn't even bother to make sense of the sense. It just provided the information. It's what we do with what's happening, what we do with the input that we're getting, that we struggle with when we're misusing it, making believe that our conclusions about reality and truth are true, when in fact there's any conflict in it. It's an indication that there's something that could be sorted out. If we don't notice that, we're not going to adapt very well to it. We're not going to adjust. We're going to get to one of those corners and ends and dark places where we think the best thing we can do is just have a drink or shoot ourselves in the head. And it's happening pretty publicly on levels that have never been seen before.
Wow.
And it isn't being discussed openly. The mental health, people say, when I talk about addiction, we've got 40,000 people living on the street in LA. Almost all of them are struggling with addiction. And I say, addiction's the problem. They say, well, it's a mental problem. I say, yes, addiction is a mental problem. We haven't even connected that bridge yet in our conversation socially.
Wow. That's true. I've heard about a lot of things about, just you make me feel bad for having a gun. It's in the safe.
That what? I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
I said, you make me feel bad about having a gun, but it's in a safe.
Oh, no. We're all doing what we're doing. If somebody pulls a gun on you and you have a gun, it's probably a good time to have one.
Well, actually,
because it feels a little bit awkward when, as I told you all, I got stabbed. It felt pretty awkward that I didn't have anything in my hand to help prevent the guy from doing it.
Oh, yeah.
There was kind of an instant thought of, if I had a pipe or a 2x4, like an 8-foot 2x4, I could probably keep this guy away. But having nothing, it's a little.
Yeah. Well,
we
you
are
know-
living in environments that are challenging. And my sense is we're not supposed to be here just to simply concede so that someone who would be willing to do something so wrong gets confidence in doing more of that thing, but actually starting to be vehicles of sanity to begin to address it in ways that keep people from even thinking about it and begin to see the best thing they can do is the best thing they can always do. And it's always going to benefit everyone rather than just them. And that includes me.
Well, now, Jack, let me clarify something. I have one because I am a very good a
Shot.
target shooter. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's fun to me
Yeah.
to shoot targets, but that's it.
You don't have to, the fact that you have it, That's good enough for me. I don't need I understand a little more about you now in relation to it, but nothing I said condemns you to what you're doing. You're doing what you're doing. I'm happy with that. That's fine.
I'm just a good shot.
Good.
But they have stunt guns on Amazon.
Stun guns?
They do.
Yeah. Well, if we were actually looking at things accurately, we'd all be stunned.
Yeah.
We wouldn't need a gun. We'd just kind of stop in our tracks and say, oh my, whatever.
Good Lord.
So part of this conversation is just beginning to open up to the idea that if we have a knowing nature, we know more than we think, always, until we begin to think we know more than we think. And when we do, it starts to become easier to allow that thinking, that knowing to be expressed in our thoughts, and also recognize that words are always going to limit that in some way, that I can't point to it with absolute clarity that everybody says, okay, that's it, done.
Yeah.
This looking that we do is literally an awareness and an awakening, according to the steps in the big book. And the awakening spiritually is to start seeing that we are spiritual in nature, in whatever that word means, that our essence is a knowing essence. And in that near-death experience thing, you'll hear people's experiences, and the doctor talk about this occurring to people for centuries, if not millennia. He talked about it happening back in the Greek times, written about people witnessing these experiences. Why do we need to seem to be in the face of death, our body dying, before we actually face things accurately? It would suggest to me that we've been so busy trying to maintain the life that isn't alive, that is dead, that is preoccupying our attention in this idea of who we think we are as being all we are, to the point where we're not paying attention to anything actually happening and only what we think is happening. And that would be an addiction of thought, in my estimation.
Yeah. It is. And oh my gosh. That was pretty cool, Jack.
So we're here to talk about that.
You have to admit, at the end of the day, I do catch on.
Well, at the end of the day is just a new day. So
Well, I just caught on.
it's like, you know what the bottom line is?
What?
Just above the total. So now we know the bottom line. Look,
Yeah.
we're all better than we think we are when all we're thinking we are is what we think. And that bit, if you just begin to think of those things quietly in moments of turmoil, you will start laughing at how much you have made of the turmoil, because you'll begin to see it's actually your focus on it that's giving you the impression that it is something real anyhow, or true. It's your constant focus on it. And that chronic focus is obsessive thinking. That is the source of all addictions, all symptoms, all reactions, all homicidal, suicidal tendencies, all of it.
So would it be considered limited thinking?
Yes.
Oh, now, see, I understand that.
So, Jack, could you repeat that? We're all better than we think we are. That.
Probably not, but this is recorded.
Oh,
we're all better than we think we are. And hey, Jackie, good to see you. We're all better than we think we are, because if all we think if all we think we are is what we think, think of that relative to an absolute nature that makes the universe small. Why wouldn't we have low self-esteem on that basis? That would be a natural byproduct of our knowingness to feel low self-esteem. And yet within the sick thinking, what we think we need to do is gain confidence about the low self-esteem and overcome it. What are we doing? Demanding that the bad thought that we have is real enough to actually try to overcome it. All it is a thought we're protecting as though it's real and true. That's it. There's nothing there. There's nothing to fight for. The low self-esteem, the self-loathing, the uncertainty, the doubt are all indications that we doubt what we're thinking. We're uncertain about what we're thinking. We're thinking things that have no esteem. Why is it low? It's giving low self-esteem would be credit compared to no esteem. If we're thinking of things that have no basis, like a lie has no substance to it at all, other than the claim it's true. There's no basis to that. There's no denominator to a numerator that we keep adding and adding and adding and adding and adding to. Nothing there.
Okay, so what about feelings? Because don't feelings attach to thoughts?
Yes, ma'am, they do.
So if you're, well, can you kind of go through that? Because if
So
you
think of some of the feelings you have that aren't emotions. Give me some of the feelings you have that are not emotions.
well, I think they're all emotions.
Well, feeling bad is probably not an emotion.
Okay, well, I guess I'm
Feeling stupid is probably not an emotion. Feeling lonely is probably not an.
Okay, stupid and lonely. That's a good one.
Okay. So if I think who I am is what I think, I'm feeling stupid because I'm stupid. My thought is stupid.
Because you defined it stupid.
No, because I'm thinking who I am is what I think. That's stupid because it isn't intelligent. It isn't true. It isn't real. It isn't applicable. It has no purpose. None. All it does is give me an impression that if I continue to maintain will become depressing.
Okay, so it is serving you no purpose.
What's that?
So to say it short term, it is serving you no purpose.
Well, the lie, the purpose it claims is the longer I fight for it, the righter I get. But if I'm not right and claim to be right, think of that conflict. If I'm claiming to be right for the sake of insisting that the lie is true, what am I doing? I'm not right. I'm actually insisting I'm right, just like I'm insisting the lie is true. The one follows the other automatically. So if I'm an idiot, not me as an idiot as a being, but my thinking is idiotic. Why? Because it has no basis. It has no intelligence. It's not smart. Feeling like an idiot would be normal. Feeling stupid would be normal with that.
I gave up the I am right, you are wrong. It's just a waste of time.
Well, to any degree you hold any thought, Loretta, any thought that creates any reactiveness in you, you're maintaining one of those thoughts that you don't think you're maintaining. And
Wait a minute. I don't think I'm right about anything.
Well, you think you're right about this right now.
No, I don't.
You just said it.
No,
now you're arguing that you're right about this.
I'm referring to the topic. I don't think
I am. I'm referring to right now.
Right now.
That's all we have. It's all we're doing. And it's what this conversation is ultimately.
I do not think I'm right now. No.
You're fighting for it.
Well, I'm confused as to what I'm fighting for here.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. That's actually, thank you. I appreciate that. And I would say, my dear, if we're trying to fight for what's right in a lie, it is confusing. Think of the word confusing. It opposes fusion. It's disconnecting from reality. It's trying to make believe that something that isn't true is true. All those things start to actually line up, and the words, even in their construction, if you look at the words and break them down, will start to reveal that there's more to the words than we've ever thought there was.
Well, that makes perfect sense to me, because words can be very misused and confusing. And, I'm finding that there's a lot of freedom in the words you pick,
Well, there's a lot of condemnation in the words you pick too. And if you look at your thoughts, they're always attached to words, because that's how we convey. If you begin to notice that the language of an absolute presence isn't in words, it's simply a stable essence It's kind of like I brought up earlier when I met you with Sharon and Dee Dee and Doug.
I'm trying
Douglas.
to get Sharon to come right now, but I don't know how to send that email to her.
She already has it. She got it.
Oh, thank you.
She's on the list. When you guys originally came, there were 6 people and 4 of you are still in touch.
Yeah.
One thing that hit me, and it was the first time that it hit me with the kind of clarity, is that you said, I felt something was right, but I didn't understand it. And I said, well, that's a definition of the difference between knowing and thinking. And I had heard that from people for years and never said, that's your knowing awareness that you're claiming.
Well,
That certainty, that ability to notice that is your certainty, your knowing. So that isn't in words. It's just a present state of it's not even an understanding. It's just a present state of essence that we know we know. And if we didn't know that, we wouldn't know what's wrong. And knowing then what's wrong is a confirmation of what we know that's right.
Okay. And I think a freedom of that type of thinking is dropping the right. Because see, I know that.
No. You know what's right? You know what's right, Loretta?
I'll tell you.
What works is right.
Open-mindedness lets you.
What works is right. If it functions as a result of the application, that would be right. If you have a mortgage payment that's due and you send them the right amount, you'll probably keep living in the house.
But if you get defensive, I recognize that now. That comes from, that comes from I am right or wrong. And so if I'm not right, I don't get defensive because I have nothing to argue with the other person about.
Well, that's a beautiful diffusion of it. And I would say you're accurate about that in terms of looking at it from the point of view that if there's a fight, there's really nothing to fight about when you begin to concede that the source of the fight is you, not them.
Right.
And they can think whatever they want because they can think whatever they want. Just keep in mind, Loretta, if there's an absolute nature that's all knowing, I would say that would be pretty right. I would just suggest that if it knows everything and is responsible for everything, that would be right rather than wrong. I would just suggest.
Is that what you would refer to as an essence?
Yes. And you know what essence is?
No.
Essential, not optional, not negotiable, not something that comes and goes, not something we can have more or less of. It just is what it is, as it is for all things and everyone. So to think your friends only have it when they tap into it is to think they are thinking about it accurately, when in fact the essence of what they have doesn't change because they think about it inaccurately and make believe their thinking is true, just like you and I have been thinking our thinking is true when we fought for the thoughts we had that were not true. Their essence doesn't change. The essence of essence can't change, so they can't not have it if we have it. We have it because we don't have it effectively. We've been given it and it is, but it isn't a thing to even have. It's just an essence that we are. The words start to fall apart at the edge. In mathematics, as infinity is approached, the numbers start to fall apart. We can't get to the place we already are. So the concept of infinity being bigger than everything is to once again categorize it as something that has size and shape and form, where it's in a dimension that has none of those things. We're in that dimension, that third and fourth dimension, and we're in all the other dimensions, but we don't see them, so we don't think that they're here, which is what physicists struggle with, like your husband. I'm not suggesting he struggles, because I'm sure he applies what works and what he knows is right so that they can get spaceships off the ground.
Right. But the fifth dimension is here.
Yes.
Okay.
We just don't see it.
Well, we don't see it, but we can go to it.
We can't. We're already in it.
Okay, then we can be aware of it and use it.
We don't have to be aware of it, and we're still in it. We're still part of it. This is the thing I'm poking at. All right, is that we think it's a negotiation of thought rather than a concession of knowing.
No, I don't. You're not following. I'm using the wrong words. Let me think about how to say this. Okay. If the fifth dimension is here, does one need an open-mindedness and awareness? Is that where more open-mindedness comes from? in awareness?
Open-mindedness is really open thoughtfulness is what it's mind. I would say mind is the absolute knowing state of being and essence. And I would say brains think.
Right.
And it's thinking that we're talking about opening. It's not something, to even say that something in the fifth dimension is here would suggest that it's within space and time, which I would suggest the point of it is that it's a whole other dimensional reality that probably transcends all of these things. But these things that we witness here are within it to the degree that we witness them as something separate from it. They're not separate from it. They're intimately bound to it all. And the interesting thing as you get to the sixth dimension is you start dealing with an infinite number of combinations of points, 6 points, 6 dimensions that are infinitely possible. Infinitely.
Well, that's where I want to go.
Well, you're here. But
Well,
again, since we don't see it, we don't think we have it.
Okay, well, I would like to see the sixth dimension.
It is seen in knowing, not in visibility.
I would like to experience the sixth dimension.
Okay, you're doing it right now.
No, Dad. See, the sixth dimension is higher. It's higher off the ground.
But then you're suggesting something that's infinite isn't here, and that's not possible.
Well, it's the only way I can visualize it at the moment.
I got it. No, you're right. And you're right. Within the confines of thought, that's exactly the way you're going to see it. But it's starting to put thought in its proper place, which is that it gauges spatial dimensions and time and all of those sorts of things. That's its job, is to kind of analyze the environment within the fourth dimension, within the third dimension, and all the prior dimensions. Katie's saying hello and goodbye. She's got a tennis lesson and the rain has stopped. So,
oh, good Lord, I'm sorry it's raining in LA. Let's not panic.
Yes, all third dimension.
There you go. Thank you, Katie. But anyway, I lost my train of thought. But
well, you can't be in something you can't be out of. So you're talking, Loretta, about issues, and you can talk to your husband about this too. When you get outside of the fourth dimension, space and time, you're not talking in dimensions anymore. You're talking in infinite dimensions that are seamlessly together in one. That's the same as what we're dealing with, but we're seeing it from a body designed to interpret something from a spatial point of view. That's all.
well,
So our bodies gauge distance, and like what our thinking is really supposed to be doing when we're not overtaxing it with trying to do what it can't do, is basically gauge, how do we get where we want to go? How do I get my feet moving without stepping off the curb because I'm paying attention to something else and getting run over by a car? How do I do any of the functional things that would get me there in the simplest way with the least amount of energy exerted, unless I want to exert more energy, so that I can preserve that energy to have it for other things I might want to do?
all right,
So I start doing the best thing in relation to what's happening rather than the worst thing in the name of thinking it's the only thing I can do.
So, Jack,
Yes, ma'am.
Today, where we are today, the reality is there is time, okay, and light that can be measured. But you're talking about a different dimension that has no time. Okay, so.
Well, so if time is within that other dimension, it's simply a possibility.
There is no time in that dimension. It can't be.
I'm saying that if time is within the concept of that other infinite dimension, and maybe it isn't there, but if it isn't there, then that other thing isn't infinite, because it has to include everything that is in any real way. And it could easily also be that most of what we're seeing is just the illusion of what we're designed to see, because it's how we see things. Anthony sent something this week about how birds that see things compared to how we see things. And it's very different. Now, I don't know who the bird was that spoke to the scientists to tell them that that's how they see things, but they seem to have figured out that, like snakes see thermal heat. They don't see shapes like we do. They see heat. If it's got blood in it and it's got a heart pumping, they want to eat it. So that's how they see. We see things according to our design. It's not how things are. We're not seeing things the way they are. We're seeing them according to how they are. Now, our other form of seeing is understanding. And if I think that my thinking is everything there is, I'm not seeing anything the way it is because I'm turning everything backward and around, thinking it's only how I think it is rather than how it is, regardless of what I think.
Well, that makes sense with the word understanding, you know?
Yeah.
Next time I'm going to get your wife's phone number and I'm going to ask her to come to this meeting with me.
She spends 24 hours a day in this meeting with me. So I think
That's my point.
this is her 2 hours off every week.
I believe it. I believe it. Lord have mercy, but that woman is awesome. I tell
There's
you.
always a little bit of truth in all humor.
Yeah. Oh, heavens.
So in dealing in those issues, Loretto, whatever those things are, they are. And however we are, we are. And to concede it in the most general way is to begin to concede it and simply resolve it and not have to spend time thinking about it because we know whatever it is, and whatever we're doing. And however things are is how things are right now, only ever now. It's only today. It's only now, ever. And I would suggest to you that even in physics, and you can talk to your husband about this, they seem to be able to think that we can go back or forward in time, but they don't seem to think we can go backward. And it's interesting that time only goes forward because it's always new.
Yeah, the point you made, it makes sense to me when you said, if we're living in the present moment, right?
What do you mean if?
Okay, we are, for God's sake, we are living in the present time.
Not time. We're living in the present.
Okay, we're living.
And I was going to make the point about the fact the present isn't in time because it can't be in time if it can't be old.
Okay,
if it's always new, it has no continuum. And what's interesting about that, you brought up light, when light is operating at light speed, which is what a light speed operates at, time has no effect on it at all. Anything that's traveling at light speed would not ever age.
Okay.
Interesting dynamic that we have within our own universe, pointing to this non-time bound reality that is our present state.
You know, I got to tell you, this is finally making sense to me.
Well, then you're in real trouble.
I know. That's what I always say is when Jack starts making sense to me.
Well, consider though, Loretta, and I say that in jest, but the fact is as this becomes clearer, looking at what we've been doing and the sickness in it will become clearer. And I will assure you it's going to be disturbing. And it isn't the kind of chronic disturbance that we've suffered by denying it. It becomes the awareness of how sick it is to continue doing it and how sick the consequences of it are and how immediate those consequences are in our own awareness of all the things that are happening that aren't good and aren't healthy. And then how quickly I actually avoid those things and do the same unhealthy things in my own experience because I can't quite stomach my own responsibility for that. I haven't yet been able to concede that at a level that I would say my entire life reflects the kind of health that I would like to convey in this mental conversation.
So
I still like potato chips.
If it's making more sense now, Loretta, what could you have done differently when you gave that person the bird and they pulled over besides shooting him?
Well, that's called bad manners, Anthony.
In Texas, yeah.
And it's bad manners.
It's bad manners to shoot somebody.
But no, it's just bad manners to shoot the bird, Jack.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
So my manners have changed on the freeway. I do not get bothered. I sing.
So if you don't get bothered, you're probably bothered to not get bothered.
I sing.
I get it. I'm just pointing out it's okay to be bothered. It isn't something we shouldn't be doing, but what we've been doing has been bothering us so much. We're finally relieved to be not doing that so aggressively.
Right. And
right?
Singing is praise. You know, seriously. It's almost like you feel joy when you sing.
Well, I'm not sure anybody feels joy when I sing, but
But you're on, yes, Steve, you're alone in the car. Get a spiritual tape and put it in there and sing to it.
Yeah.
Sing how great their art. And you cannot cuss at people on the freeway.
Well, then I would never do that.
My art is not so great, so it looks pretty messy.
Anthony, you're so refreshing.
That's Chris.
Oh, Chris.
So we're talking about beginning to allow what's happening to be happening and not be addicted to it and not create the addictive cycle by pretending what is happening isn't happening, which then puts us off on this sort of loopy reinforcement that we're not doing what we're doing and we're pretending to be doing something else, and all of a sudden think all we are is what we think, because we can become so enmeshed in this kind of inner conflict. It's starting to just let what's happening is happening, right? And if we have any greater awareness, it will become obvious when we're no longer in the preoccupation of that internal debate over what isn't happening.
Right.
So our conversation here, you can see, if you listen to it again, you'll hear that I get sidetracked and others get sidetracked in their own attempting to make sense of the thinking they're doing as though it makes any sense, rather than just begin to witness. And I think we had that moment here when everybody got very quiet. And I've seen that consistently when people are contemplating, considering what's going on. It generally doesn't lead to a lot of conversation. It's just an awareness. It's just a sitting, a watching, and observing. And our knowing awareness is observing everything that's happening. We know everything that's going on. We're just not paying attention to it when we're preoccupied with thoughts. And it doesn't mean it isn't happening because we're not paying attention. It means it's happening and it's doing everything it's doing, and everything that's happening is happening. We're just not paying attention to it. And to not pay attention,
Bless you. You okay?
Excuse me. When I was a kid and they taught you to walk to school safely, they said, look both ways. Look, what was it? Look, stop, look, and listen when you come to a corner.
I remember that.
So you don't get run over. So that's good information from kindergarten.
Yep.
About when you start to feel the friction and the stop, look at what's actually happening, your own experience, and listen to what it's telling you. It begins to give you a chance to notice that you got all the information you've ever needed, where you are with what you're doing and what you're experiencing. And there's nobody you need to use as an excuse, and nobody else anywhere that's ever going to fulfill your satisfaction and coming to terms with it. There's nothing they're ever going to do, and there's nothing you're ever going to buy or have that's going to solve that if you're unwilling to notice the beautiful, harmonic, organized sensations that we're creating are accurate assessments of what we're thinking, and as a result, what we're doing, and what's happening, what's actually happening, not what we think is happening.
Are you talking about your senses?
Well, the senses, you might have come in a little late. Senses provide raw data. Senses don't say it's hot. Senses say whatever. The brain is what turns it into language.
Oh, okay.
And the other thing too, Loretta, and I missed this point when you brought up the thinking and the feeling. Thinking and feeling, as far as I can tell, are, and Laura Alice helped me with this, are immediate, but they're like flip sides of the same coin, and it's cause and effect. If I do something, there's going to be an effect to that something I do. If I think that that's something that effect's always going to be exactly what it is for the thing I do, always. If I think it should be something else, here I go again with thinking I'm going to dominate how things are, creating another conflict. What am I going to say? I didn't do that. I didn't want that. That wasn't me. It was you. Why did you do that? If you hadn't done that, this wouldn't have happened. So I embroil myself in these fractured relationships on the basis of simply not allowing myself to witness, or allowing the witness I am to observe things and then concede them accurately as they're happening. Not necessarily in words, but just concede it's happening as it's happening, and I'm feeling what I'm feeling as a result of that. So feeling and cause and effect are thoughts you never choose a thought that you don't want something for or from. So there's always an expectation attached to it. And choosing a thought is what self-will is. That's our will. And why do we will it? Because we want something. We're choosing to do something, we're going to get something. That's the payoff, as Anthony was asking about last week. The payoff is the imagined result we thought we'd get when we took the action to begin with. Doesn't mean it's coming. It may and it may not, but the better chance of it coming is going to happen if we're actually sensitive to what's happening. And if we were wrong in our original assumption, we can adjust accordingly to circumstance, like the sailor is adjusting to weather conditions he doesn't expect. He's a lot better off in attempting to get where he's going if he's actually adjusting to things as they happen rather than as he thought they should happen.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. It wouldn't it be the best thing to do is to let that thought you have that's not right go right then.
Well, it isn't a matter of letting it go. It's seeing that if it's interpolated, it has no basis until I start thinking about it more.
Well, that's what I mean. So you discard it.
You don't have to. There's nothing to discard. When you stop paying attention to it, it's gone.
Well, that's discarding it.
Well, but
that's true.
Let me clarify, though, Laura. When you're thinking there's something there to let go of, you're thinking there's something there to hurt you and attack you and be against you. There isn't anything there but the thought we're having about the thought we're having. That's it. This is a major difference to the idea. The ultimate letting go is realizing I never held on to anything. I was delusional in the thinking that the thing I thought that was wrong was right. The only reason I have those thoughts and continue those thoughts and base my actions on those thoughts is because I think they're right and as a result possible. And nothing that's not right is possible. So I've been trying to gain the impossibility of turning truth into reality, which I can't do. That's insanity. That's what drove me to think drinking was a solution and drugs were a solution, trying to get out of the pain of that thinking.
Yep.
So the idea, and this is a major shift in my understanding of what's going on, is when I realize that if the thought's wrong, it has no basis. And for me to think it's right, I've created a conflict with nothing. And where is the conflict? It's in my continuation of thinking it even exists, to think that I can let go of it, rather than see I've been holding a clenched fist, claiming there's something in it. When I finally relieve the fist, the fight, I open it up. There's nothing there. There's never been anything there. So there's nothing to discard or let go of. The immediacy of that gives me a much clearer understanding of how I can misuse my thinking at any moment, so that I stop doing that because I stop starting. I start seeing that's not going to help going that direction. There's nowhere to go. I can tell if there's a conflict, there's nowhere to go with it that's going to get any better than right now. And that's when I begin to realize there's nothing to that thought. It's not only not wrong, it can't possibly be right. It doesn't have any basis to it. To say that it's even wrong is to say it might have some right in it.
Yeah.
And when it comes to applying things, if I apply a thought that's wrong, the application of that thought is going to work exactly in relation to the thought I have about the thing I'm doing. If I go to fix the bolt or the wrench and the wrench is too big and I can't get it around it, it's not going to, I can sit there for years and it's never going to take that bolt off. The difference is if there is some applicable purpose or something in it, when I apply it, I'm going to get some feedback in the universe that's going to confirm the application, because something's going to start working differently in my environment. And if what I'm creating seems to be attacking me, I wouldn't say that's what I'm after. That's not what I'm looking for. I keep claiming I don't want it, and yet I keep creating it and claim I don't want it. That's a conflict. The applicable purpose will be purposeful in the usefulness of it. It'll start working immediately. It'll confirm the thought rather than just create more friction to give me more information. That's the feedback I'm getting and not listening to, saying, there's nothing here. You can keep pushing. You can keep going. There's nothing there. What's impossible is always going to be impossible. You want to think the world's impossible? Keep acting in impossible ways, thinking in impossible ways. The world doesn't become impossible. I just over-exaggerate the world being a problem because I don't want to admit the glaring nature of the problem I'm trying to ignore and avoid.
Is that what you call feedback?
Yes. Well, and backfiring too is part of that. It's like a car when it's not tuned properly, or the old days that I don't even know if they still have distributor caps, but if the alignment of the spark plugs wasn't right, you'd get feedback because the pistons wouldn't be burning the oil, the gas, and they'd be exploding too soon or too late or whatever they do. But the other point to this, Loretta, when you talk about feelings and thoughts, feelings are always interpreted in words, right? I feel bad, I feel wrong, I feel less than, I feel this, that, and the other thing.
Yes.
And yet we're having an experience of the feelings that are basically just disturbing and uncomfortable. We don't have to put words to that because we get a little queasy.
Yes.
That sickness in the stomach and the tension in our throat and the sort of the reluctant, you can feel it. That essence, that's your senses talking without words.
That's an alarm.
Yes, it would be a signal or an alarm or a sounding of some sort to tell you it's basically feedback. It's just giving you a mirror image in different forms to say, here's you if you're pushing a single point that has no point, you're trying to use a single dimension to gain perspective. You can't do it. So what's the perspective? How we feel. What's the next perspective? What we act on. How are we acting with the people around us? Am I antagonized by everybody? I'm probably antagonizing myself. And I would say, I don't say probably anymore. I say, I absolutely am. I don't get into the debate anymore. I just say, if it's happening, you're doing it. Herb Kagan says, if you spot it, you got it, period. If I see it in somebody else, I'm doing it. And I start there rather than figure out what's wrong with them any further. Doesn't mean I don't mutter to myself a little bit, but I know I'm muttering. And I know that that's just another indication of how invested I am in the thinkings. But the primary point of this now long monologue is that pain is registered only in the brain. It doesn't register in the toe that's been stubbed. It doesn't register in the hand that's been burned. The senses send the signal to the brain something's wrong. The pain, the friction, the stress, the anxiety are all indications something is wrong. They are not proof of reality. We use them as though we're proving, well, it hurts, it must be real. No, we're using that as an excuse to justify continuing to do the thing that hurts.
All right, so wait a minute. If you put your hand on a hot iron, are you telling me you don't feel that?
I'm telling you that your brain is registered. You know how when you pick up something really hot in your hand, it takes a second for it to it's coming?
Oh, okay. So then it sends it back.
It's the nerves transporting that information. That's the time it takes the nerves to tell your brain something's hot. But the nerves don't tell it it's something hot. They just provide it raw data. And the brain says that's hot. Kids don't know it's hot. When kids touch something, they don't say hot. They just say get away. They just move away, right?
Right.
They don't say, they learn hot and burn and all that. But the difference is if you pick up that hot, like sometimes these teacups, when they're filled with boiling water, I pick them up, they're too hot. I got to put it down. It takes a second for that to register. With mental anguish that we're creating in thoughts, there's no time lag. It's immediate. We suffer immediately from it. There's no lag at all. It's the core, the place that we're doing the thinking that's insane is the place that's creating the friction and the stress and the anxiety that we're suffering from, because it's telling us we're wrong in what we're thinking, not in who we are, nothing else. And if we continue, we're going to be wrong in what we're doing, and we're going to have that evidence to give us perspective.
That made sense to me. I'm
Don't worry about the sense, because the sense we think of making sense because we are the interpreters of the sense that our body doesn't make, but provides us with naturally. And as you sit and watch what's happening, the words won't be necessary to you to be a witness to your body's experience, and you'll see more of what's going on because you'll be witnessing it not from the limitations of the thoughts you have about it and the words you use, but from the actual experience. We have a perfect Geiger counter to what's going on because we're intimately connected in that seamless fifth and sixth dimension to everything that's happening in all the ways that it's happening right now. We can think we're not, because we can think we're not doing what we're doing. Freedom allows us that. Love allows us to kill ourselves if we think that's the best thing we should do. Love doesn't step in the way of that, because there's no death in the absolute essence of our existence. It's just a body we're throwing away unnecessarily too soon. Under the basis, which will always happen if we impose the same recipe for disaster in our thinking. It's a natural consequence. Compulsions and addictions are natural consequences of this kind of thinking, which is why there's 150 different 12-step programs dealing with all sorts of symptoms that are all based on the same exact disease.
So is anorexia included in what you're talking about?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's dozens of food programs, which include anorexia and bulimia and overeating and how is honesty, openness, and willingness.
Yeah, but you know what? There are no anorexic meetings. I've only met one other anorexic. It's very hard to find.
Well, you're in Texas, and it's probably not a place a lot of people admit it. Out here, it's something people do very publicly and readily. So it's not rare. It's not rare. I think there are some here. Katie may be able to help you with that if you're interested.
Well, no, I'm going to be honest with you. I would never go because I stay in AA. I'm going to tell you. I think they'll sort it out. Because, in AA, you learn to take care of your body.
To that degree, you are fortunate to be an alcoholic because it is the sort of taproot of all the recovery programs.
Right. Absolutely. But it's just mind, body, and spirit. And if you're going to, do things to harm your body, it's the vessel you have. You know what I mean? It's not right.
But it's common.
It is very common.
And it's not normal, but it's been normalized. Just like insanity has been normalized to think that disease is common and natural when healing is a miracle. It's actually the opposite. Healing is natural and disease is the miracle that we put up with it and make believe there's nothing we can do about it while we continue to do the things that continue to cause it and think what we need is a cure.
Okay, but it is not common. I'm going to anorexia. People will say
I don't know.
Yeah, people will say
it's common to people struggling with it.
Well, there's two different ways to look at it. It's
the point, though, Loretta, is that it's all sourced in the single thinking that causes the ideas that we could kill ourselves. And I remember I lived with the son of a friend of my father's who knew Karen Carpenter in the 70s when she
was a real one.
Yeah, and nobody recognized what was going on. Nobody knew at the time what was going on. And she killed herself.
Rainy days and Mondays weren't all that got Karen Carpenter down.
Well, my point is...
Jackie speaks. It's all centered in this idea, though, that we're struggling with something that needs to fix us in some way that's killing us.
Right.
It's the same line of thinking.
Wait, hold on. There's a lot of people that say they're anorexic because they're thin. But I'm not debating. Control.
I'm not trying to debate and qualify anybody. I'm suggesting that all of the symptoms are coming from one mental problem. They're fractured states of the exact same problem. The exact idea that who I am is all I think. And as a result, I need to project an image of self that's the best image I can. And in doing that, I kill myself in the process.
No,
it's
about control.
Well,
it's your first form of control. So it's attached to a feeling. That's what's weird,
So is alcoholism.
Yes.
Sometimes I wish I was an anorexic.
Well, you know what, Anthony? Why don't
when we go to lunch, so do I, Anthony. When I'm buying.
Just say you are, Anthony. Everybody else does. So there you go.
No, this is a serious problem, though, for people struggling with it. This is not some casual thing. And the essence of it is an idea that somehow I'm better by being thin. I'm going to be better and can't
But that's
stand.
not anorexia. That's what my point. That's not it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just not.
Whatever it is, because I'm not an expert in all the different symptoms. And maybe it's a symptom that's completely disconnected from all the other symptoms. But my sense is anything that kills people prematurely that they are doing on their own,
right,
it as an inducement of some sort, whether they think they're doing it or not, they're part of it, is fundamentally flawed by the same thinking that undermines every one of the 150 different programs. It's the same. There are probably thousands of undiagnosed ways people have been doing this that have not been noticed. Getting diseases is another way. Think of the way people who aren't anorexic and eat fried foods for 30 or 40 years and wonder why they all of a sudden their body starts to break down. Nothing wrong with fried foods. If it's all you eat, it might be a problem. It may be that our bodies don't tend to deal with that oil very well in the system, and it clogs things up and starts completely undermining the whole potential. I'm not suggesting you can't or shouldn't do it. I'm suggesting if you do it, and if you do it compulsively, it's going to create a problem. Think of every one of the drugs.
You don't know you're doing it. You do not know you're doing it.
Of course you know you're doing it.
No, you do not.
Somebody who's 400 pounds doesn't wonder if they're overeating.
But this is about control.
Can I tell you guys something interesting? I took a psychology class, and in the big book, I forget what it's called, of all the disorders and stuff. I studied anorexia, and people with anorexia are more prone to kleptomania. And I did have I did have two friends that were anorexic, and they were kleptomaniacs as well. And so then when Winona Ryder was stealing stuff and nobody knew why she was stealing, I knew that she was probably anorexic.
Oh my God.
But you see how it fractures. Whatever we're doing that's corrupt is going to lead to other corruptive tendencies.
Right. I feel like it was because they weren't putting things in their bodies. They wanted to take things.
Oh my God. No.
Well, what they want to take is the food out of their body too.
Yeah.
So part of the point, Loretta, you're talking about control. It's exactly what an alcoholic thinks.
Absolutely.
That they can control and enjoy their drinking. And so what do they do? More of it. But
this is about a fear control that you don't know you're doing.
Yeah, they have a tendency to live in garages and shoot people.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's all about control, but when you have no control over the control you're trying to control, we drive ourselves crazy and do things that are completely contrary to reality, which is health and well-being.
That's right.
And productivity and gainfulness and usefulness and generosity and love and support and all those things. We strip ourselves of that ability to even do those things because we become so preoccupied with the disease we've created, we become useless for the most part.
And can you ever really be too skinny?
I weighed 86 pounds.
I would say that would qualify.
I went to an emergency room and they stuck a tube up my nose. So yeah, you can't.
Yeah, it's the throwing up that's the problem. I was going to open a treatment center, and they said that a eating disorder center is much worse because by the time the people get there, they're just dying. Where alcoholics, they can recover pretty quickly.
Well, I was supposed to Betty Ford Clinic to sober up, but they didn't take me because I was anorexic. But because I don't know. And then I ended up at La Hacienda, and I really didn't think about it. I wanted to sober up.
As our thinking is healthy, we will make healthy decisions. As our thinking is unhealthy, we will make unhealthy decisions. It's very simple. If we're not reading the roadmaps, and you say, Loretta, people don't know, they absolutely know.
About what?
Their suffering is their admission they know. They want to claim they don't know so they can continue to think the way they're thinking that's continuing to do the thing they think they don't have any control over. That's a very convenient excuse, like a child saying, I'm not taking the cookies, but I just happen to have a lot of chocolate around my lips.
Do you mind saying that again, what you said about control?
I don't know what I said about control, but you can re-listen to this. But
okay.
If we're trying to control something that we have no control over because it's impossible, we're creating impossible situations that we have no control over to claim what we need is control over them. Well, it's just another conflict.
But when a fear is attached.
Okay, look at my hand. Mm-hmm. If I'm trying to control what's in my hand by keeping it closed, is there anything there to control?
No, I don't know. Are you fearful of it? Are you fearful of it?
If I think there's something there that's I think is true and I think I'm going to protect it, I'm going to be afraid someone else might open my hand and find out there's nothing there. Naturally. Because I know what I'm doing is wrong. I know what I'm thinking has no basis. I know that the only place that thing is happening is in my brain, and I need to keep it there and shut everyone else out to protect me against it. When I start thinking in that way, I start feeling lonely, disconnected, apart from. All those feelings are natural. And if you listen to the words, it's talking about the thinking I'm doing, not the essence of my existence or who I am. It's talking about what I'm thinking, which again points to the fact that it's my thinking that's creating these seemingly global consequences as a chance to distract myself from what I'm doing in the essence of my own existence to contribute to those things that are happening globally. I'm part of that all. We're all part of that all. We are, whatever that impact is being made, all participating in that impact, whether we think we are or not, whether we're participating actively or negatively, where we're trying not to do it and think that we're better off because we're not doing it, but we're still part of it because it's based on this same unhealthy tendency. That's what our conversation is about. And as we focus on that, which isn't as usual as we tend to focus on all the different deviations and complications and stories and things that we can think about, is to actually begin to notice that that's happening now. The essence of our knowing is happening now. It's present now. It's probably not even happening. It's just a presence that's present, that's all knowing, that we know. You and I, all of us know this. We can't be here and not know it. We can't be a part of it and not know it. It's impossible. We can think we don't.
Wow.
And we can think all sorts of things. And if I can think I'm not thinking what I'm thinking, it's a pretty good evidence I can think I don't have any greater knowing than what I think.
You know, you just described what anorexia is.
Well, I think part of the point of this launch was to mention that all of the symptoms are symptoms of the exact same problem.
Yeah.
If there's an absolute knowing source, that's our source, period. Over, done. No more debate, nothing to think about. What would that mean? That we have everything at our resource, as a resource, everything in our human experience to act in ways, think in ways, feel in ways, and act in ways that are healthy and beneficial and useful. And yet we don't do that very well.
I appreciate that, Jack. I really do. Because I never really
appreciate you, Loretta.
How did you finally get over it, Loretta?
Well, it's just like he said. My mindset went to that my body is a vessel that God gave me to put here on earth. So I can take care of it and let it be a light bearer vessel, or I can continue not to eat and, you know, get too thin. And I know what that tube feels like. So, I mean, you see what I mean? I would not be of service. There you go.
I think the survival instinct kicks in too. At some point, your body goes, I'm dying. I got to stop this.
The problem is, Anthony, that our survival instincts, just like our thinking, completely reverses when we're thinking our thinking is reality.
Yeah.
So the instinct is to kill ourselves. That's what compulsions are. They're all slow forms of suicide, every single one of them. So is reactiveness, because we're asking for a fight, and yet we're acting like we're peacemakers and don't want to fight. Yet we're reacting in ways to others that isn't inclusive, it's exclusive. So another point, Loretta, going to the other side, because I think we made a little progress in the seeing the sort of fundamental issue, mental issue in relation to that. My sense is that obesity is starvation.
Well, I've wondered that.
Because people are eating food. You don't tend to have people obese from eating too much broccoli.
No, you don't.
Or asparagus. So when the body gets food in quantity that it doesn't know what to do with, it starts storing it. Just doesn't know what to do with it. It's like, okay, thanks. And then it says, feed me more. What I need now is nutrition. So what do? Feed it more shit. What does it do? I need more. We feed it more shit. We feed it more shit. We feed it more shit. That's a mental breakdown of listening to what the body's saying, which is exactly what you just said. I am your vessel. I am your car. I'm your automobile. I'm your spaceship. I'm your spacesuit for the time you're here.
Yeah.
How well do you want to take care of me? How well do you want to feel? How well do you want your neurons to fire in your brain? How well do you want your body to feel well?
Yeah.
And what that would require is nutrition. And what's nutrition? Health. And what's healthy? Organic, normal, growing things in the soil, not pollutants, not chemicals, not pesticides, but things that actually don't inhibit our ability to function, things that actually nourish us. What do we do in mental things? Food for thought. If there's no nourishment in the thought, what do? Obsess, 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 obsess. Think more and more and more about nothing, thinking someday we'll turn it into something, and wonder why nothing we ever get is enough, and enough never becomes enough.
Right.
Same thing.
Hey, Jack, I'm signing off from the most obese city in the United States of America.
Well, I think Loretti's with you. Aren't you? You're both in Houston, right?
Where are you, John?
I'm in your city.
Oh,
John is the one you spoke to earlier.
okay.
A month or two ago.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Nice to see your face.
Oh,
I'm signing off. Thank you.
Peace. So part of that issue is if our bodies so easily know how to tell us something's wrong by not being able to deal with what we're feeding them, then that knowing nature is really being overlooked and denied in the name of thinking this is fine because it tastes good, feels good. What does the book say? We didn't like the taste of alcohol, but we liked the effect. And one of the points about this that I started and went way off, but every one of the things we tend to be addicted to are refinements of nature. Alcohol is a refined spirit. It's comes out of fermentation, but it's a concentrated form, which is why it's so effective in terms of a stimulant. Cocaine. If you take coca leaves and chew on them, very little happens. You get a little stimulant like a cup of tea. But you take acetone and other chemicals and break it down and only get the most stimulative aspects of it down. You concentrate it to a point, our body doesn't know what to do with it. What do we become? Addicted to it. It's trying to figure out what to do because we keep doing more of it. It doesn't know what to do. So what do we think? Do more, because our thinking's twisted now, backward. Heroin's the same thing. You could eat an opium poppy and probably not get high at all. You could eat marijuana leaves and not get high. And marijuana has been refined and refined and refined and refined to get the THC levels up to where people want it, to where it's a much different drug than it was when I was a kid and smoked it. We had some pretty good stuff back then, but comparatively speaking, my sense is people are putting themselves to sleep. They're in comas. They're in waking comas.
really?
Well, the ability to be able to create something that is, it's like raw sugar or refined sugar.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it sugar cane?
Is sugar cane raw?
Yes.
Yes. If you eat sugar cane, it comes with fiber. Fiber offsets the glycemic impact of sugar. But what do we eat? White sugar, refined to an essence that our bodies can't deal with. It's too much. It's too concentrated. We're not designed to eat that. If you look at every drug and at fentanyl, it takes a grain of fentanyl to kill somebody.
That drug is.
It's so concentrated.
Yeah.
And it's like juices. Juices have more sugar in them than Cokes do. Most juices. If you look at the number of grams per ounce or serving on a bottle of juice, they have more sugar in them than Cokes do.
I think it was you that told me, but I have a heroin addict and I'm her buddy. And so I don't know anything about heroin, at all. And she said, well, I'm going to go get some fentanyl lollipops. And I think you told me to tell her, well, you best get a case because you're going to want more than one.
Well, she's trying to cure one problem with another major problem. And it lines up though. So in the hours we're away, and I know that some of us talk during the week, and I'm happy to do that and always appreciative of the conversation, consider some of the things that I may not deliver very well, and I may be caustic in my own approach and a little demanding in my insistence and any other way of being that could be difficult to digest. But consider in the more global aspect that your own choice about what you do with what you hear and what you think and what you feel, and your thinking, your feelings are going to be commensurate with your thinking, are choices you make, just choices.
Yeah.
And if you're making choices and ending up with consequences you don't like, those are consequences you didn't think you'd get from the choices you made. You thought that choice was a winning formula. You were going to get somebody's attention. You were going to finally straighten something out. And when you get a fight, I guarantee you, if you look at the fight and just say, oh, I really didn't want the fight. Ultimately, I didn't want the fight. But in my sick thinking, I'll take the fight because it gives me a little distraction from the thing I'm doing that's causing the fight. Gives me a little preoccupation so I can think about what's wrong over there rather than begin to notice what's wrong here.
Wow.
Begin to just witness that. Begin to notice that. You already notice it, and everything that's happening is happening as a result of it. As you begin to allow your brain, through your knowing sense, to look at it, you're going to start seeing clearly you've been very much aware of it the whole time, thinking simply that you could avoid it by thinking you weren't thinking what you're thinking. And that is the deeper issue that seems to be deep, but it's very superficial if we're continuing to reinforce the problem right now. If a problem is bad and we think it's intractable because it's gotten too bad, we can either continue to make it worse, or we can begin to stop by noticing what we're starting and allow it to start to dissipate on its own. Those are choices we make. And they're both equally able, and one becomes much more sensible once you start using it, even though you maybe have never used it in terms of the obsessive nature of thinking. It may be something so new as to think it will take as much time as it took to get as bad as you've gotten in the thinking, when in fact it doesn't take that time at all, because naturally it reaffirms itself immediately by just beginning to admit what's happening is happening the way it's happening, and I'm central to it in some way. I don't even have to know why or how or when and where or any of it. Just say, it's me. I'm choosing this. I'm responsible for it, and sit with that for 10 minutes. And it diffuses so many actions that lead to problems that seem so intractable once they start, simply by beginning to just sit by and stand by. And often what I started saying to people early on was, I just don't know what to say right now. I don't want to launch in a crusade of thinking I do. And I generally tell them I love you. And I would like to let that be the basis of my next thought, rather than something I might say that is either harmful or hurtful. And then I began actually learning to just say, let me share my thought. And I think it's wrong, but I'm going to share it anyhow, just to get used to exposing myself. And like with Katie, I'd say, this is a thought I have. And it's about you, but it's a thought I have. Thought that I have about you. A thought. So this is a thought. This is a thought I'm telling you. And then she'd listen. And all of a sudden, within a week, she was telling me things she was thinking that she'd never bothered to say. And all of a sudden, there was some freedom between us. And we started laughing at how similarly we were doing the same thing while thinking it was the best thing we could do.
And
so the adventure kind of pops up a little bit, and the exploration starts. It's like now we're on the spaceship and we're actually moving through space and looking at what's going on, rather than trying to figure out why the windows are obstructed.
And curiosity and stuff that makes an adventure. Laughter is just,
I think it's natural. Laughter, as far as I'm concerned, is a release of depression. The release of the seriousness nature of things that I held serious because I thought they were real when they weren't real or serious. That's why people say, I just don't take myself seriously anymore. So there's no self to take seriously when you actually think about it. Clearly, there's no self there. You have to take it seriously to think there's a self. Why aren't we? Of course, we're defensive about people saying things about us that we don't like. It's not about us. It's about our thinking that we're defending. That's all.
Yeah.
Appreciate this. Chris, I'm glad to have you here. I love you guys. I appreciate that we get to do this. I know it is probably lots of football games and other things to be doing, and I appreciate that you came here and spent the time, and let's continue. Love you guys.
It was lovely. Bye, Jack.
Thank you.
Appreciate you doing this.
Peace. Every day.
Pax vobiscum.
What's that?
Pax vobiscum.
What is that?
Well,
Latin?
peace be with you. If you weren't an altar boy, you wouldn't get it.
Oh, no, I wasn't. I was an altered boy.
Thanks a lot, you guys.
See you. Bye, Anthony.